Welcome back, brothers, to Warhammer. Tonight's lore, we're diving into the Imperial Fist, looking to get even with the Iron Warriors. Before we get to the madness, be sure to like, comment any videos or topics you want to see in the future. Be sure to subscribe for the Emperor. I want to thank you guys for the support. Y'all been killing it like always. Now, let's get to the madness.
Malodrax hung in the void like a curse given mass. It did not turn with the serenity of a world. It waited. Its polluted storms crawled over continents of iron and ash, dragging their black bellies across mountain ranges that were not mountains at all, but bastion chains raised by centuries of slave labor and traitor genius. From orbit, the planet's surface showed no oceans, no forests, no patient blue of life beneath cloud. There were only wound-colored furnace seas, trench continents filled with corpse mud, cyclopean walls visible through the murk, and the red pulse of Manufactoria burning beneath the skin of the world. It had been made into a weapon. Orbital batteries circled it in layered rings, some fixed to dead moons, others mounted upon the bones of gutted warships chained into position by cables thicker than hive spires. Mine belts drifted beyond them, not in neat Imperial patterns, but as a diseased halo of debris, scrap metal, corpse ships, frozen servitors, demon cages, and hunter-killer engines sleeping in the dark. Auspec's ghosts swam there. Dead Vox signals murmured from wrecks that had no crews. Every fragment of drifting iron had been placed with intent. Every corpse in orbit was a range marker. Every silent battery was a promise. Malodrax did not invite invasion. It remembered it. It had learned from every fleet that had burned before its guns. It had swallowed crusaders, pirates, raiders, pilgrims, renegades, and fools. It had chewed them down into metal, bone, and heat. The Iron Warriors had taken the idea of a fortress world and stripped from it all weakness, all pageantry, all wasted ornament. What remained was function. What remained was malice sharpened by mathematics. No cathedral crowned its highest citadels. No banners of triumph flew clean in its poisoned winds. The towers of Malodrax rose like iron teeth through acid cloud, black and gunmetal, banded with hazard stripes, plated with adamantium scales, each one bristling with macro cannon, flak lance, missile silo, void shield node, and vox spite array. The trenches below them were not lines dug into earth. They were continents of murder, layered in depth, roofed in places by iron plates, flooded in others with chemical runoff and the rendered fat of the dead. Corpse carts moved through them on rails. Slave gangs dragged ammunition shells the size of hab blocks under the whips of overseers, whose own spines had been replaced by obedience engines. The sky above the world was a lid of toxins. The ground below was a throat, and still, the Imperial fists came. The strike cruiser held position beyond the outermost range of the enemy guns, surrounded by the cold discipline of a fleet, translating into battle order. Its hull was scarred from ancient wars, its prow carved with the brutal honor of the Sons of Dawn, its gun decks awake and chanting with the thunder of loading mechanisms. Serfs moved in processions through its arteries, bearing shells, incense, prayer strips, and fresh blood for the machine spirits. Tech priests bent over targeting shrines. Naval officers spoke in clipped whispers, as if volume alone might disturb the wrath gathering inside the vessel. In the strategium, Captain Darnath Lysander stood motionless. Terminator armor made him vast, but it did not make him clumsy. He seemed less a warrior wearing plate than a bastion given limbs. His warplate had been polished until its yellow ceramite held the cold gleam of execution steel beneath the lumen glow. The black and white of the Imperial fists marked him with heraldic severity. Purity seals stirred faintly in the recycled air. Oaths of moment hung from his armor in strips of parchment, each one inked by chaplain's hand, each one a vow made before the Emperor, Dawn, and the dead. His helm rested beneath one arm. His face was bare to the strategium's light, and there was nothing gentle in it. Lysander's silence had weight. It pressed upon serfs and officers. It made veteran space marines speak less than they already did. It was the silence of stone before impact, of a gate that would not open, of a wall that had endured too many sieges to believe in mercy. Men had called him hero. Men had called him exemplar. Men had named him first captain, son of dawn, shield of the chapter, hammer of the enemy. Malodrax had called him prisoner. His left gauntlet rested upon rampart, the storm shield locked upright beside him, its face marked by blows that had broken traitor blades, demon claws, Xenos talons, and the desperate weapons of dying men. His right hand enclosed the haft of the Fist of Dawn. The Thunderhammer's head was dark, heavy, and sacred, its power field dormant, yet humming with the restrained violence of a contained storm. It was not merely a weapon. It was judgment made portable. It had crushed warlords, shattered armor, cracked skulls within helms, and ended arguments that had lasted since the heresy. The hammer remembered. So did he. Black hooks, iron laughter, without joy, a chain tightening around his wrists until bone shifted beneath skin, the smell of burned nerve tissue, a vox recorder clicking awake before every question, a voice asking him to name the weakness of dawn, a drill entering flesh, his own breath, bitten down, held inside his chest until his lungs burned, and the Iron Warriors learned that silence could be hated as much as screaming. The memory came and went in less than a heartbeat. No one in the strategium saw it. No one saw the cell. No one saw the shackles. No one saw the knife edge of remembered pain slide beneath the armor of the present. Lysander's eyes remained on Malodrax. A hololithic image of the fortress world turned before him, layered in tactical red, amber, and cold Imperial blue. The projection showed orbital mine belts, battery arcs, void shield harmonics, probable launch silos, slave forge concentrations, trench density, demon engine signatures, and corrupted machine traffic pulsing beneath the crust. Every line was a threat. Every rune was a cost. Chaplain Malrek Thane stood to Lysander's right, skull-helm mag-locked to his belt. Crozius held in black gauntlets. His armor was the color of mourning, broken by bone and yellow. A winged skull hung from his gorget. His eyes were hard beneath a brow, carved by centuries of war. "You have refused the signal from the relief elements," Thane said. Lysander did not look at him. "I have acknowledged it. That is not the same as accepting it." "No. The Ultramarines offer ships. The Blood Angels offer assault companies. There are guard commanders begging to drown this world in bodies before we commit the first company. They may beg elsewhere." The chaplain watched the planet turn. "This world took you. This world failed to keep me. It also remembers you." At that, Lysander turned his head. The motion was slow, almost mechanical. "Then it will remember me again." Thane's jaw tightened. Around them, the strategium continued its cold work. Vox officers murmured range corrections. A servitor clicked and drooled black lubricant from a split lip, while its augmetic fingers typed firing solutions into a brass console. Somewhere far below, a loading hymn rose and fell, as macro shells were drawn toward the guns. "Vengeance," said the chaplain, "can become a breach in the soul." Lysander's grip tightened on the Fist of Dawn. The weapon's dormant field crackled once, a low growl of caged thunder. "A breach," he said, "is where a wall admits weakness. I am not breached." Thane did not answer. He only lowered his gaze for a moment, as if committing the words to memory, not for argument, but for judgment. Across the gulf of void, Malodrax answered with fire. The first Iron Warrior's batteries spoke from a dead moon, whose surface split open like a rusted wound. Macro lances stabbed outward in coherent beams of white heat, striking the lead servitor ships before their machine minds could even complete evasive prayer. The decoys died as intended. Their hollow hulls burst into expanding flowers of plasma and corpse dust. Dead crew things vaporized in their restraint thrones, their last transmissions nothing more than Binharic shrieks. "Outer batteries active," reported a deck officer. His voice did not shake. He was an Imperial servant aboard an Adeptus Astartes warship. Fear had been trained into silence long ago. Enemy range estimation confirmed. Minefield patterns shifting. "Let them shift," Lysander said. The Imperial Fist's fleet advanced. Not quickly, never recklessly. It moved like a siege line in space, each vessel holding place in a formation calculated to invite fire, absorb it, measure it, and answer. Strike cruisers and escorts slid through the dark behind veils of chaff, false heat ghosts, and butchered servitor craft. Dead ships went first, guided by lobotomized pilots whose last duty was collision. Behind them came the true vessels of the chapter, their shields flaring under distant impacts, their prows steady, their gun decks waking in full wrath. Macro cannons fired. The void became violence. Shells crossed the distance between fleet and fortress moon in burning swarms. Lance beams cut through debris fields. Torpedoes, black and gold, punched through curtains of flak and blossomed against orbital armor. Mine clusters woke in response, tumbling from corpse wrecks and hollow asteroids, their demon-bound cores shrieking across the Empyrean as they sought living heat. A servitor ship took 3 in its flank and vanished in a red sphere bright enough to paint every Imperial viewport in blood-colored light. Another wreck detonated too close to an escort frigate, its shields overloaded in a wash of blue fire. For a moment, the ship's spine showed through its own hull, decks opening like ribs. Mortal crew were drawn into space in boiling streams, men and machine thralls reduced to red mist, fragments of uniform, teeth, and bone splinters freezing instantly in the void. The frigate did not break formation until its engines died. Even then, its last act was to roll its burning carcass into the path of a mine swarm, meant for the strike cruiser. "Frigate, his unbroken will is lost," said the deck officer. "Record its name," Lysander said. "It is done, Lord. Record also that it held formation." "Yes, Lord." There was no grief in the exchange, not because there was no loss, but because grief had no place in the firing line. It would be counted later. It would be carved in stone if worthy. For now, the dead served by dying correctly. In the depths of Malodrax, the Iron Warriors watched. Warsmith Barak Torval stood within the command vault of Kulgard, his armor fused with the throne gantry that fed him every tremor of the fortress world's defenses. He was not the greatest lord of Malodrax, not while Shontu's shadow lingered in every sealed order and encrypted vault. But he was the hand upon the wall, the mind directing the first exchange. His helm was a slab-faced thing of iron, its eye lenses burning a cold furnace red. Cables entered his spine. Data streamed across the inside of his skull. Casualty projections whispered in one ear. Slave expenditure rates whispered in the other. He watched the Imperial formation advance and felt no admiration, only recognition. "Dawn's sons," he said. Around him, the command vault pulsed with dirty light. Siege Captain Mordrain Hex stood before a battery altar, his gauntlets locked into targeting engines, his voice rasping coordinates to gun crews scattered across 3 orbital rings. Each word condemned thousands to labor, recoil death, or immolation. Warpsmith Kadrak Vol hung suspended above a demon reactor schematic, his mechadendrites buried in a console that had once been a living astropath. The thing still had a mouth. It still tried to prey when the scrap code allowed it. "They come in strength," said Hex. "They come in pride," Torval replied. "Strength can be counted. Pride can be used." Fol's voice came wetly through a grill grown into his throat. "The outer mind belt requests release." Denied. "It hungers. Everything hungers. Hunger is not command." The Warpsmith's tendrils flexed. The bound engines below Kulgard are awake. The Bastion reactors strain against their chains. Let them strain. Pain improves obedience. A slave overseer approached the command dais, shaking beneath his rebreather mask. He carried casualty projections on a slate. Torvald did not look at him. "Speak," the warsmith ordered. "Outer labor cohorts along trench bands 7 through 12 have fallen below useful strength. Radiation leakage from the western shell foundries has rendered replacement stock unstable. The flesh tithe from the lower manufactoria is delayed by revolt." Torvald turned at last. The overseer stiffened. "Then weld the rebels into the next ammunition train." "My lord, that will reduce hauling efficiency by—" Torvald shot him through the chest with a wrist-mounted bolter. The overseer burst open across the floor, ribs snapping outward, organs slapping wetly against the iron grating. His slate clattered beside him, still blinking with its useless concern. 2 servo arms descended from the ceiling, dragged the body into a waste chute, and sprayed the blood into a collection groove. "Efficiency restored," Torvald said. No one laughed. Iron warriors did not need laughter to be cruel. Above them, the void battle worsened. The Imperial fists drove their corpse screen forward into the outer belt. Dead servitor ships accelerated under command pulses, engines burning past safety, hulls cracking under stress. They plunged into the mines like sacrificial fists. Each impact tore open another pocket of hidden death. Plasma storms rolled across orbit. Demon cages burst, releasing brief shapes of claw and hatred before vacuum, and lance fire erased them. Wreckage spun away in molten arcs. Frozen bodies cartwheeled through clouds of glittering shrapnel. Entire chains of mines detonated in sequence, forming a ring of fire around the fortress world. The strategium shook as distant force struck the cruiser's shields. "Outer belt reacting," said the officer. "Enemy pattern attempting to fold inward." "Predictable," said Lysander. "Our wrecks will not clear the full path." "They will clear enough." A veteran in Terminator plate stepped from the shadowed edge of the strategium. Sergeant Hector Voss bore his helm beneath one arm, his face marked by old acid scars and newer surgical staples. "First boarding elements stand ready. Teleportarium rights are prepared. Assault craft await launch command." Lysander inclined his head. "Hold!" Voss did not question him. The fleet fired again. This time, the strike cruisers loosed their full wrath into the exposed segments of the mine belt. Macro shells slammed into debris clusters and ruptured hidden engines. Lances speared through corpse ships, turning them into white-hot skeletons. Boarding torpedoes launched not at ships, but at dense knots of orbital wreckage, delivering explosive charges and murder servitors into the heart of the belt. The torpedoes vanished among the scrap, then detonated in carefully staggered sequence. The effect was apocalyptic. A third of the visible heavens above Malodrax ignited. Fire moved where fire should not live, carried by plasma, promethium, venting oxygen, and warp-tainted reaction. The mine belt became a burning crown. Dead ships spun apart. Iron fragments became meteors. Servitor heads, still wired to control thrones, tumbled through the radiance with their mouths open. The orbit of Malodrax filled with corpse metal and light. For the first time in centuries, there was a wound in the planet's outer defense. Lysander looked upon it and saw not victory, only entry. "Signal the fleet," he said. "Advance to second engagement distance. Prepare for Bastion Null. No allied force is to cross our line. No external command is to interfere. This is an Imperial Fist's action." The officer relayed the command. No one questioned it aloud. Chaplain Thane watched him from beneath lowered brows. The strike cruiser moved forward through the burning dead. Below, beneath kilometers of iron crust and fortress strata, something vast received the augur confirmation. Not a single cogitator, not one command throne. Malodrax itself stirred through its networks of guns, reactors, slave pits, vox relays, demon cables, and buried rage. Across Colgard, Red lumen strips awakened. In the trench continents, overseers beat slave gangs into motion. Gun crews were stapled into firing cradles. Demon engines pulled against their chains hard enough to split the flesh welded around their joints. Sirens wailed from towers that had not sounded since the last great invasion died screaming against the walls. In the command vault, Barak Torval received the identity rune, Darnath Lysander. For a long moment, the warsmith said nothing. Then another voice entered the chamber, not from any visible speaker, but from the sealed black vox line buried beneath the throne dais. It was old, amused, and dry with remembered cruelty. "Open the channel," the voice commanded. Torval obeyed. A signal climbed from the depths of Malodrax. It passed through pain engines and shield relays, through corrupted astropathic bone, through vox towers made from the hulls of conquered ships. It rose through poisoned cloud and burning orbit. It crossed the corpse-bright void and entered the Imperial fist's strategium in a hiss of static that made every mortal present taste iron. Lysander heard the first breath before the words. He knew it. His fingers tightened around the fist of dawn until the haft creaked in his gauntlet. The voice spoke softly, as if from the other side of a cell door. "Come down, son of dawn. The cell is open." The War Council assembled beneath a ceiling of armored glass, where the void beyond burned with the reflected death of the mine belt. No one shouted. The Sons of Dawn did not need volume to shape war. They had never been a legion of roaring theatrics, not in the manner of the wolves, nor a host of gilded angels singing their way into murder, nor a brotherhood of hunters painting terror across the dark. The Imperial fists spoke in measured tones, in confirmed ranges, in lines of advance, in tolerances, in acceptable loss, in walls taken and walls yet to fall. Their hatred did not lessen because it was quiet. It became colder, cleaner, sharper. The strategium of the strike cruiser had become a shrine to calculated violence. Hololithic projectors filled the air with Malodrax, rendered in layers of light. The fortress world revolved before them as a broken sphere of red threat runes and cold blue response vectors. Its orbital relay moons glowed like diseased eyes. Its bastion chains were marked in jagged rings around the equatorial furnace belts. Its trench seas showed as black arterial scars across entire continents. Manufactorum shields pulsed in amber, each one tied to subcrustal reactor nodes and geothermal anchors sunk deep into the bones of the planet. The projection did not show a world, it showed a problem. Lysander stood at the center of it, the fist of dawn resting head downward against the deck, rampart locked to the vambrace of his left arm. His Terminator plate made the chamber seem smaller around him. Lumen light glinted from the polished ceramite and from the oath seals affixed across his armor. Around him stood captains, sergeants, tech marines, chaplain thane, naval masters, astropaths sealed behind pane screens, and serfs bearing data slates in trembling hands. Every man in the chamber watched the hololith. Every man knew the cost was already alive and waiting. Tech Marine Severian extended one red gauntlet, and the planet split open in layered projection. Beneath the crust, lines of corrupted energy pulsed from node to node. "The enemy shield structure is not orbital alone," Severian said. His voice came through his helm grill as iron over static. Void shield harmonics are anchored into geothermal shafts below the fortress cities. Surface bombardment will collapse local shield facets, but not the planetary defense lattice. Lance fire alone will scar Malodrax. It will not open it. A naval master swallowed before speaking. Sustained bombardment over several days may degrade the outer lattice, Lord. Lysander did not look at him. At what cost? The mortal officer's face hardened with the effort of speaking truth before demigods. The fleet would remain in range of their primary gun moons. Loss projections are severe. Define severe. Escorts destroyed, strike cruisers crippled, mortal crew losses in the hundreds of thousands before measurable surface degradation. Unacceptable, said Lysander. The word carried no mercy for the mortal dead. It was simply the judgment of a wall assessing pressure. Those lives would be spent elsewhere. Chaplain Thane's skull helm hung from his belt, its hollow eye sockets facing Malodrax, as if already condemning it. Then the world must be entered. It must be cracked, Lysander said. In order, blind the eyes, break the teeth, sever the arteries, crush the heart. The hololith obeyed a command blink from Severian. Bastion chains brightened. Orbital relay towers pulsed above them in angry red. The moon called Bastion Null appeared beside the planet, magnified until its surface filled half the chamber. It was a black rock plated in gunmetal, covered in macro batteries, auger towers, ammunition vaults, and Iron Warriors' hazard markings so vast they could be seen from void approach. It hung above Malodrax like a mailed fist held ready to strike. Bastion Null governs outer defense coordination for the Eastern Hemisphere, Severian said. It relays minefield correction, flak sequencing, and void shield pulse data to the planetary lattice. Sergeant Hector Voss leaned closer to the projection. He bore the calm of a veteran who had survived too many boarding actions to believe in clean entry. If it falls, the first descent corridor opens. If it falls, said Chaplain Thane, the enemy will have prepared for its falling. They are Iron Warriors, Lysander replied. They prepare for all things. That has never made them invincible. The chamber absorbed the words. No one smiled. No one voiced approval. Approval was for parade grounds and weak commanders. In the presence of a true objective, men either understood or they failed. Lysander turned toward the assembled veterans. First Company Terminator elements will strike by boarding torpedo and teleportarium insertion once the outer batteries are engaged. Veteran Voss, your squad will breach the primary relay vault. Chain fists forward. Storm bolters locked to corridor suppression. No prisoners, no delay. Voss bowed his head. By your command. Devastator cadres will suppress the exterior gun lines. Lascannons to shield projectors. Missile launchers to flak nests. Plasma cannons held until breach confirmation. Assault squads will remain in reserve for trench line decapitations once descent begins. Dreadnought assets will not be committed to Bastion Null unless the relay vault survives first contact. A low voice came from the edge of the council. Brother Arvane Routh, ancient in his sarcophagus below decks, spoke through a vox idol mounted near the hololith. His words were slow, filled with machine growl and tomb depth. I stand ready to break the gate. You will break a greater one, Lysander said. There was a pause. Then the dreadnought answered. Then I remain. The hololith shifted again. Blue lines of Imperial assault formed across the red enemy architecture. They did not look dramatic. They looked inevitable. Knife points, hammer blows, kill zones accepted, fire lanes marked, sacrifice corridors acknowledged. In the mathematics of the plan, mortal naval crews would hold fleet position beneath enemy gun arcs until their own blood boiled in ruptured compartments. Servitors would guide wreck ships into mine clusters until their brains cooked inside copper skull casings. Penal thralls would load macro shells until recoil concussion liquefied their organs. Chapter serfs would die sealing breaches in void-exposed decks so that the Astartes could reach the next engagement intact. The scale of the war was obscene. There were not billions of space marines. There would never be billions of the Emperor's angels. Each battle brother was too rare, too sacred, too terrible a weapon to exist in such numbers. The billions were shells. The billions were slaves screaming beneath Iron Warriors' whips. The billions were corpse laborers born, spent, and rendered in Manufactoria. The billions were cultists packed into trenches as meat screens. The billions were machine crews, gun loaders, penal cohorts, menials, servitors, vat-grown ammunition haulers, and nameless bodies ground between the teeth of two ancient bloodlines. The Astartes were few. That was why each death mattered. That was why each death had to purchase something worthy. Lysander watched the plan form and felt the old cell tighten around his wrists, a hook through the meat beneath his shoulder, a chain drawn over a pulley, a voice like gravel inside iron. Tell us where Dawn hid weakness, a needle entering the eye without permission to close it, a laugh without joy. He blinked once. The strategium returned. Malodrax turned before him in obedient light. No one had seen the memory pass through him. No one but perhaps Thane, whose gaze remained upon him for a moment too long. "Lord," said the naval master, "Allied vessels remain outside our declared line. They request final confirmation that they are not to support the assault on Bastion Null." "Confirmed. Their commanders state that withholding support will increase chapter casualties." "They are correct." The mortal officer waited, hoping for more. None came. Thane stepped closer. His black armor seemed to drink the hololithic light. A wall may stand alone, but a fortress is stronger with bastions beside it. Lysander's eyes remained fixed on Bastion Null. "This is our breach." "It is your wound." "It is our breach," Lysander repeated. The chaplain did not challenge him again before the council. That too was discipline. Far below Malodrax's crust, warsmith Barak Torval watched his own projection of the same war. His command bunker had no glass, no banners, no ornament that did not serve function. It was buried beneath Kulgard, behind layers of iron, rockcrete, blast gel, void baffling, and screaming insulation made from living nerve clusters. The walls trembled with distant industry. Ammunition crawlers moved through tunnels like armored worms. Chains rattled without wind. Somewhere below, a furnace door opened, and a choir of men died in heat. Torvald did not rage at the Imperial plan. Rage was for warriors who lacked equations. He stood fused to his command cradle, his armor linked by cables and puncture feeds to the logic engines around him. His helm's red lenses reflected Malodrax in thousands of tactical fragments. Bastion Null blinked in his display, circled by predicted Imperial approach vectors. "Obvious," he said. Siege Captain Mordrain Hex stood at an artillery pulpit nearby, his hands locked into brass command stocks. "They will strike the moon, of course. We can reinforce it. We will not." Hex turned his iron helm slightly. "Explain." Torval marked 3 landing zones upon Bastion Null's surface. They glowed green, not red. "Leave these sectors under strength. Withdraw the second wall reserves. Keep the outer batteries loud. Make the approach appear paid for. Dawn's sons distrust a gift, but honor a wound." Warpsmith Kadrak Vole hung above them in a nest of mechadendrites, his warped armor breathing in wet clicks. "You make a door. I make a grave with hinges." Foal's tendrils caressed a demon-bound targeting engine. The thing inside the engine scratched at its brass housing with claws made of thought and hate. "The relay vault will be exposed." "The relay vault will lie." Mordrain Hex issued the commands without further question. Iron Warrior's obedience was not born of love. It was forged from hierarchy, bitterness, and shared contempt for waste. Across Bastion Null, garrison cohorts shifted. Gun nests were abandoned. Ammunition lifts were left half full. Corridors were opened that should have been sealed. Automated casualty projections adjusted, then adjusted again, accepting the deaths of thousands as the price of a more useful trap. Torval looked toward a secondary slate. Slave battalions. A mortal overseer limped forward, one side of his face replaced by a crude obedience plate. He had survived longer than most. That had made him careful, not safe. "Awaiting order, Lord." Drive them into the eastern trench corridors. Full banners, full heat signatures. Make them visible to Imperial augurs. They will be obliterated. Torvhall stared at him. The overseer bowed so fast, his spinal brace clicked. It shall be done. It was done. On Malodrax's surface, thousands of slaves were herded from armor shelters and driven into exposed trenches beneath the lash and shock prod. Some wore rags. Some wore scraps of flak armor. Many were already dying from rad sickness or furnace lung. They carried empty rifles and banners painted with false command sigils. Above them, Iron Warriors' augur bafflers opened just enough to let Imperial eyes see the movement. The first Imperial targeting spirits marked them as enemy reinforcement columns. The slaves saw the sky brighten. They had time to scream before lance scatter and macro shell shockwaves turned their ranks into vapor, bone dust, and cooked mud. Their deaths served three purposes. They confirmed Imperial target behavior. They cleared old trench stock. They warmed the soil for the next defense layer. In another sector, wounded cultists were dragged from infirmary pits and welded into gun servitor cradles. Men missing legs had ammunition feeds drilled through their spines. Men with blasted faces had targeting lenses hammered into their skulls. One failed overseer, still reciting battery tallies through broken teeth, was carried to a promethium furnace and fed into it feet first. He continued counting until his lungs ignited. The Iron Warriors recorded his final numbers. Above the world, the Imperial assault began. Bastion Null swelled in the forward viewports, black and scarred, its batteries firing in relentless sequence. The moon spat flak storms and macro rounds into the void. Imperial escorts burned under its guns, but did not turn aside. Strikecraft died in bright, brief flashes. Boarding torpedoes launched from the strike cruiser's prow in ordered salvos, each one a coffin, filled with ceramite giants and consecrated wrath. Voss stood inside the lead torpedo, Mag locked to the restraint shrine, with 5 of his brothers around him. His squad had been 10 when they entered the embarkation chapel. The rest waited in the second wave. The torpedo shook around them as point defense fire clawed at its armor. "Impact in moments," said Brother Galrin. Voss sealed his helm. The world became targeting runes, breath rasp, armor pressure, and the steady pulse of his twin hearts. "Bolters ready," he said. "Aye. Chainfists wake." The weapons came alive with a growl of teeth and power fields. "Remember the order," Brother Galrin answered. "No prisoners, no delay." The torpedo hit Bastion Null like the wrath of a falling fortress. For a heartbeat, there was only impact. Then the front of the torpedo became flame, metal, and screaming pressure. Breach charges detonated. The assault ramp blew inward through a wall of black iron, and the Imperial fists entered through smoke, decompression, and flying bodies. Storm bolters cracked in disciplined bursts. The first Iron Warrior in the chamber took 3 mass reactive rounds through the chest. His breastplate blew outward, and the meat inside his armor burst across the wall in a red fan. Another traitor raised a combi bolter and lost his arm to a chain fist before Voss put a round through his helm grill. The bolt detonated inside the skull. Eye lenses flared, then went dark. The corridor beyond was narrow, built for murder. Iron Warriors fired from both ends, their hazard-striped armor filling the smoke with muzzle flare. Voss advanced through it, storm shield locked, bolter firing over the rim. A round struck his pauldron hard enough to turn him half aside. He corrected his stance and kept moving. Brother Galrin's lightning claws took a traitor across the abdomen, opening ceramite, mail, flesh, and blackened organs in a single wet tear. The Iron Warrior tried to speak. Galrin removed his head before the first syllable formed. "Forward!" Voss ordered. They went forward. Behind them, more boarding torpedoes struck. Some found their marks. Others vanished under battery fire, their occupants never reaching battle, their names already becoming stone aboard the cruiser. The surviving Imperial fists drove inward through blast doors and relay chapels, through ammunition shrines and rusted barracks. Chain fists screamed through adamantium locks. Stormbolters hammered traitor legionaries back step by step. The walls ran with blood that froze in patches where decompression vents tore atmosphere from the corridors. Then the Iron Warriors closed the trap. The pressure doors slammed down with the finality of guillotine blades. Red warning runes flashed once, then inverted. Gravity died. For an instant, bodies, shell casings, blood, severed limbs, broken helms, and fragments of armor floated together in terrible silence. Then gravity returned sideways. The chamber became a killing cylinder. Voss slammed into a wall, mag locks biting. Brother Galrin missed his lock by a fraction and spun upward into the open space. Bolter fire caught him in the torso, detonating across his plate, jerking him in the air like a butchered puppet. Servo skull mines emerged from wall niches, their tiny engines whining, their metal jaws clicking open around explosive charges. "Mag lock," Voss voxed. "Hold formation." Brother Orden was too slow. A mine struck his helm and detonated. His head vanished in a burst of ceramite shards and red mist, his body continuing to fire for a heartbeat before it drifted away. Another mine hit Brother Castor's knee joint and blew his leg off below the thigh. Castor did not scream. He locked his remaining boot to the wall and kept his Stormbolter level. Voss rotated his aim upside down relative to the chamber's new axis and fired. His brothers followed. The Imperial fists made a wall where no floor existed. Stormbolters thundered. Chain fists tore into pressure doors. Servo skulls burst in mid-air. Iron Warriors advanced along the opposite wall, firing with cold precision, but the Sons of Dawn did not break. One by one, Voss's squad died or locked into place, each brother holding a portion of the chamber with his body, his shield, his weapon, or his corpse. Half the squad was gone by the time the final door opened. Voss stepped through the blood mist and smoke with 3 brothers remaining. "Relay vault ahead," Castor voxed, his voice distorted by pain suppressors and blood loss. "Can you move? I can kill." "Acceptable," said Voss. They reached the vault under fire. Its doors were thick enough to shame a bunker gate. Chain fists bit into them, showering sparks across the dead and dying. Inside, the data core pulsed with corrupted light, its cables running downward through the moon's crust toward Malodrax below. Voss planted melter charges, while Castor and the others held the corridor. When the core split open under heat, it did not simply die. It confessed. Data screamed into Imperial receivers before Severian's distant rites could silence the scrap code. Images filled Voss's visor. Beneath Malodrax, under its shields and walls and gun towers, continent-sized engines pulsed in the dark. They were not powered by reactors alone. They were threaded with bodies, rows beyond counting. Captives wired nerve to wire, spine to conduit, skull to harmonic relay. Men kept alive beyond sanity, beyond mercy, beyond the shape of prayer. Their pain fed the void shields. Their agony tuned the fortress world's defenses. Voss stared for 1 second. Then the charges blew. Bastion Null's relay vault died in white fire. Across orbit, the moon's batteries stuttered. Imperial lance fire found the gaps and tore through them. Gun towers cracked, shield nodes ruptured. Bastion Null began to burn from within. Aboard the strike cruiser, the data reached Lysander. The hololith showed the pain engines beneath Malodrax, vast and obscene, their living circuits glowing in the dark. No one spoke. Lysander looked down upon the world that had once held him in chains. Then he said, "Now we know where to strike." Chaplain Thane watched him carefully. "And now," the chaplain said, "we know what they have made of the innocent." Lysander's face did not change. "There are no innocents on Malodrax," he said. "Only captives, traitors, and the dead." Below them, The fortress world turned beneath its wounded moon, and the shields of Malodrax continued to shine with the pain of the living. The descent began as a wound in the heavens. Malodrax's upper atmosphere boiled under the approach of the Imperial fists, its ash storms cut apart by burning contrails, lance after-images, and the black silhouettes of falling warcraft. Drop pods came first, hurled from orbit like judgment shells, their hulls glowing white at the edges as they punched through poisoned cloud. Thunderhawks followed in disciplined attack wings, their engines roaring through atmospheric turbulence, their armor slick with soot and burning chemical rain. Storm ravens plunged lower, weaving through curtains of fire, their assault cannons spinning before they had even found clean air. The Iron Warriors answered from the ground. Flak towers vomited black-orange fury into the sky. Macro shells rose from fortress emplacements in thunderous columns, each one dragging smoke and shrapnel through the murk. Hydra batteries stitched the air with streams of tracer fire. Missile silos opened across the outer wall complex and spat warheads upward in volleys so dense they looked like iron rain falling in reverse. The sky became a slaughterhouse of burning wings, broken ceramite, and dying machine spirits. A drop pod vanished under a direct hit, its armored petals still sealed, its occupants turned into cooked paste and ceramite fragments before they could make war. A Thunderhawk lost its port wing, rolled through a curtain of flak, and struck a lower bastion with enough force to split the tower open from crown to foundation. For a moment, flame gushed from every firing slit, and silhouettes of Iron Warriors' gun thralls burned inside the breached wall like insects trapped in amber. The Imperial craft did not scatter. They descended through the storm in attack geometry, each loss creating a narrower corridor for those behind it. Pilots with bleeding eyes held vectors until their cockpits blew inward. Servitors continued chanting altitude data after their organic lungs were gone. Gunships fired while falling, their heavy bolters chewing open flak nests, their missiles slamming into shielded towers and drowning them in smoke. From orbit to ground, the war was already eating men and machines by the thousand. Captain Darnath Lysander did not descend inside a gunship. He came by wrath and teleportation. The teleportarium of the strike cruiser had become a chamber of restrained lightning. Tech marines and robed adepts stood around the rune circles, their voices sunk deep in Binharic prayer, their mechadendrites plugged into brass sockets that screamed static into their skulls. Caged machine spirits thrashed against the strain of punching through Malodrax's interference. Warp bleed crawled along the walls in frost patterns shaped like claws. Incense burned black. Blood smoked on the sanctified iron floor. Lysander stood at the center of the first circle with his Terminator veterans around him. Sergeant Hector Voss stood to his right, Stormbolter locked and Chainfist growling in idle hunger. Apothecary Brannock waited behind the line, his Narthesium folded against his gauntlet, his helm lenses dark and patient. Chaplain Malrek Thane held his Crozius across his chest, whispering the litanies of hate in a voice low enough that only the armor spirits heard him. Teleport lock is unstable, Tech Marine Severian voxed. Enemy interference persists within the outer wall mass. Material obstruction probability exceeds acceptable threshold. Define acceptable, Lysander said. By Codex measure, this strike should be delayed. By Dawn's measure, a pause. By Dawn's measure, it should be endured. Lysander lowered his helm into place. Seals locked. The world narrowed to targeting data, heart rhythm, armor pressure, and the waiting growl of the Fist of Dawn. Begin. The teleportarium vanished. For an instant, Lysander was nowhere. There was no deck beneath his boots, no air, no war, only pressure, screaming light, and the sensation of his atoms being dragged through a needle of frozen fire. He felt Malodrax reach for him. He felt its old hate scrape across the outside of his soul. There was a smell of burned iron and opened flesh. There was laughter in the dark, dry and joyless. familiar enough to make his hands close harder around the hammer. Then reality returned with a detonation of blue-white force. The Imperial fists appeared inside the Furnace Cathedral. It was no place of worship, unless the Iron Warriors worshipped recoil, heat, and suffering. The chamber rose high enough to swallow a hive spire's heart, its roof lost in smoke and furnace glow. Great piston columns pumped beside altar foundries. Chains thicker than battle tanks dragged ammunition cradles through the air. Brass censers swung from gantries, spilling ash made from burned slaves. At the far end of the cathedral, a macro cannon-loading shrine sat embedded in the outer wall, fed by hundreds of sweating, chained bodies and overseen by iron warriors in soot-blackened plate. The teleport strike was accurate. It was also brutal. Brother Caedmon materialized halfway through a loading piston. For a single heartbeat, his upper body existed above the mechanism, Stormbolter already firing, before the piston descended and pulped him into the machinery with a wet thunderclap of ceramite, bone, and meat. Brother Solth appeared inside a brass ammunition cradle. His Terminator armor fused with the metal in a flash of light, and his reactor pack screamed as it overloaded. Voss turned his shield toward the blast as Solth detonated, spraying fragments of sacred plate and cooked flesh across the floor. Another veteran came in without his lower body. He still raised his Stormbolter and fired at the nearest traitor before his organs spilled hot across the iron grating. No one panicked. No one cried out in grief. Wall, Lysander voxed. The surviving Terminators formed around him with instinctive precision. Storm shields locked. Chain fists came forward. Storm bolters rose over shield rims and began their work. The first volley struck the artillery crews before they understood the breach had happened inside their own sanctum. Mortal loaders burst apart in sprays of blood and bone chips, their chains snapping taut as their bodies fell. A corrupted gun priest took 3 bolts through the chest and came apart in layers, ribcage opening like a cracked ammunition crate. Iron warriors turned from the gun shrine, weapons rising, their hazard-striped armor glowing in the furnace light. Lysander advanced. Bolter fire hammered the shield wall. Rounds struck rampart and detonated in white flashes, each impact strong enough to kill a mortal man through shock alone. Lysander did not slow. His veterans moved with him, heavy, boots crashing through blood, slag, and the remains of their own dead. "Apothecary," Voss voxed. "I see them," Brannock replied. The apothecary moved behind the line, while shells cracked overhead. He knelt beside Brother Caedmon's remains, where they were spread through the piston housing. There was no body left to save. There was only duty. Brannock's Narthesium unfolded with surgical clicks. He cut through ruined armor, reached into a red cavity where the warrior's chest had been, and removed what could be preserved of the progenoid glands. Rounds struck his backplate. One punched through a purity seal and shredded parchment into the air. He did not turn. Brother Solth's remains were burning inside the ammunition cradle. "Solth?" Voss asked. "Lost beyond recovery," Brannock answered. There was no lament. Saving a brother was honor. Recovering gene seed was sacred. Taking the breach was necessity. When honor and necessity stood opposed, the Sons of Dawn did not look away. They chose the wall. The Iron Warriors unleashed the lower pens. Gates ground open along both sides of the Furnace Cathedral. Murder servitors came first, stumbling things of vat muscle, iron masks, and weapon arms, their torsos studded with injector plugs and pain nails. Some had heavy stubbers bolted through their rib cages. Others dragged rotary saws or chain blades that screamed against the floor. Behind them came slave Ogryns in crude armor, huge and drug-maddened, their eyes replaced by red command lenses, their fists wrapped in riveted iron. Corrupted artillery crews followed in layered mobs, their bodies blistered by heat, their mouths stitched around Vox receivers, still reciting loading cant as they charged. They were not warriors. They were ammunition that breathed. The Imperial fists spent them accordingly. Heavy flamers roared from the Terminator line, turning the first wave into a moving wall of fire. Murder servitors walked several paces while burning, their weapon limbs firing wild bursts into the ceiling before their ammunition cooked off and blew them open. Slave ogrins crashed through the flames, skin sloughing from their faces, fat bursting and sizzling beneath armor plates. Storm bolters met them at close range. Mass reactive shells punched into their bellies and detonated, hurling ropes of intestine across the floor. One Ogrin reached the shield wall and smashed both fists into Brother Castan's storm shield hard enough to crack the outer plate. Voss stepped beside him and drove his chain fist through the brute's throat. The weapon screamed downward, opening the Ogrin from jaw to sternum in a red flood. The trench corridors leading out of the furnace cathedral became ovens. Promethium rolled through them in hungry sheets, crawling over bodies and up walls, turning iron ladders cherry red. Men screamed in the choking dark until their lungs cooked. Bolters spoke over the flames with disciplined rhythm. The Sons of Dawn moved one pace at a time, shield, fire, step, shield, fire, step. At the far end of the chamber, a figure descended from the gun shrine. He was larger than the iron warriors around him, his armor thick with additional plating, his helm crowned by riveted iron studs and a crest of blackened chains. Skulls hung from his torso on hooks drilled through ceramite brow plates, each one painted yellow beneath old blood and soot. Imperial fists helms. Some had names carved across them, some still bore fragments of oath parchment fused to the bone by heat. His power maul dragged sparks across the floor. Darnath Lysander, he voxed, his voice amplified until it rolled through the cathedral. The wall builder returns to the wall that caged him. Lysander kept advancing. I am Drekar, the traitor said, called the rivet sold by those who understand that iron must be hammered into obedience. I wore your brothers when you hung in the deep cells. I heard you refuse to scream. I heard you learn that pain has more patience than pride. The Imperial fists continued firing around their captain. The duel opened inside a storm of war. Drekar raised his maul. Its head crackled with a dirty power field. Dawn's sons build walls because they fear what waits beyond them. We break walls because we know the truth. Pain is the only architect that matters. Lysander reached him without answering. Drekar struck first. The maul crashed into Rampart power field, shrieking against Storm Shield, the impact blasting sparks and force lightning across the floor. Lysander absorbed the blow, boots grinding into the iron deck. Drekar swung again, faster than his bulk promised, hammering the shield, shoulder, shield again. The traitor fought like siege artillery given limbs, each blow meant to crack position, force adjustment, open weakness. Lysander gave him none. The fist of dawn rose. Drekar tried to turn the blow with his maul. The thunder hammer met the weapon and shattered its haft in a burst of power discharge. The second motion followed immediately, brutal and exact. Lysander drove the hammer into Drekar's helm. The champion's head vanished into his chest cavity. There was no speech, no curse, no final insult. His helm flattened under the blow, eye lenses exploding outward, blood and brain matter blasting through the gorget seams. His body remained standing for a moment, twitching beneath the weight of its trophies. Then it collapsed at Lysander's feet, the skulls of dead Imperial fists clattering against the deck. Lysander stepped over him. The furnace cathedral fell within minutes after that. The outer wall did not fall because its defenders broke. It fell because its purpose had been fulfilled. In the command bunker beneath Kulgard, warsmith Barak Torval watched casualty runes bloom across the wall complex with cold interest. The cathedral was marked as lost. The artillery shrine was marked as silenced. Drekar's life sign vanished. Mortal wave expenditure exceeded first projection by a narrow margin. A lesser commander might have felt irritation. Torval felt only the completion of a test. Tempo recorded, said Siege Captain Mordrain Hex. Continue. Ammunition expenditure from the Imperial fists is below anticipated threshold. Correct for discipline. Teleport accuracy confirmed despite interference. Their tech marine is competent. Mark him. Chaplain placement identified in second wave. Mark him also. Hex's gauntlets moved across the command altar. Command hierarchy remains centered on Lysander. Torval's red lenses brightened. As expected. Around them, the Iron Warriors adjusted the war. They had not expected to hold the first wall. The wall had been bait-wearing armor. Its loss gave them timings, angles, command responses, fire discipline, casualty tolerance, teleport distortion patterns, and the measure of Lysander's patience. The dead were not mourned. The slaves were not counted as men. Drekkar's fall was entered as a data point with martial relevance and no emotional weight. On the surface, the Imperial fists claimed the parapets. Victory smelled of blood, burning oil, and corrupted rain. The first wall stretched across the ash plain in both directions, a continent-scale fortification of black rockcrete and adamantium bracing. Its battlements were ankle-deep in pulp. The dead had been crushed under armored boots until bodies lost shape, becoming a paste of flesh, teeth, shattered bone, shell casings, and mud. Rain fell from the poisoned sky in greasy sheets, washing blood into drainage channels that ran beneath the wall and downward toward the manufactoria below. The gutters drank eagerly. Malodrax wasted nothing. Servo skulls drifted over the battlements, their lenses clicking as they recorded casualty oaths. Apothecary Brannock moved among the fallen with other white-armored brothers, cutting gene seed from the dead, while the rain hissed against exposed organs. Chaplain Thane stood beside a shattered gun housing, speaking names into the vox one by one. Each name became a stone in memory. Each stone became part of the wall the chapter carried within itself. Sergeant Voss approached Lysander through the rain. His armor was scorched and dented. One side of his helm had been gouged down to bare ceramite beneath the yellow. Blood that was not his own ran from his chain-fist teeth in thick strings. First wall taken, Voss said. Lysander stood at the parapet, looking beyond the captured defenses toward the next layer of Malodrax. Through the ash rain, more walls waited. More towers, more trenches, more guns retreating into smoke. No, he said. First lie answered. Voss looked out across the killing ground and understood. Behind them, Tech Marine Severian had knelt beside a control node half buried in the wall's inner rampart. The machine shrine was damaged, but not dead. Its metal faceplate twitched beneath his touch. Thin streams of black lubricant ran from its seams like tears. Severian inserted a mechadendrite into the exposed socket and began the rite of forced confession. The wall resisted. Its machine spirit was not a single spirit. It was a chorus of shackled systems, corrupted subroutines, demon whispers, an old Iron Warrior's command logic layered through the structure like nerves. Severian's helm lenses flickered as data bled into him. His servo arm dug into the floor to anchor his body, while the wall's pain rolled through the connection. "What do you read?" Lysander asked. Severian did not answer at once. His voice, when it came, carried static. "The wall is hollow. Bunkers. More than bunkers. Retreat arteries, counter-assault rails, ammunition veins, engine channels. The outer wall is not a fixed structure." The rain intensified. Somewhere below, metal groaned. Voss turned his helm toward the parapet stones beneath his boots. "Clarify." Severian ripped his mechadendrite free. Black sparks spat from the socket. "The wall has bones," he said, "and they are moving." For a moment, every Imperial fist on the battlement felt it. The captured wall shuddered, not from bombardment, not from collapse, from awakening. Deep beneath the parapets, engines older than the siege began to turn. Pistons the size of Hab towers unlocked inside the rockcrete mass. Chains tightened in the dark. Buried reactors flared. The drainage channels reversed flow, sucking blood and rain downward faster, feeding something vast beneath the surface. The first wall rose beneath them. It was not masonry. It was a siege engine, and the Imperial fists were standing on its back. The wall rose beneath them, with the slow hatred of a buried god. At first it was only a tremor through the soles of ceramite boots. Then the parapet split. Rockcrete cracked in jagged seams, not breaking apart in ruin, but unfolding with purpose. Iron plates ground against one another beneath centuries of ash. Towers shifted, their foundations unlocking from the plain, rotating on hidden pivots until their gun slits became mouths and their buttresses became limbs. The captured battlement convulsed from horizon to horizon, and the Imperial fists standing upon it were no longer occupiers of a fortress wall. They were passengers on a waking siege engine. A section of parapet dropped away without warning. 3 battle brothers vanished with it, their armor striking the lower machinery in flashes of yellow and black before piston teeth closed over them. One of them fired as he fell, Stormbolter spitting defiance until the mechanism swallowed him whole. Another was thrown outward into the ash storm, tumbling from the rising wall into the trench continent below, his impact lost in the grinding thunder. The entire battlefield changed shape. The ash plane buckled as the wall engine dragged itself free of the earth. It was kilometers long, vast enough to shame a hive district, its spine made from the outer wall the Imperial fists had just taken, its belly a furnace labyrinth of gears, chains, slave engines, demon reactors, and armored caverns. Battlements slid apart and reformed as weapon limbs. Macro cannon housings became shoulder mounts. Gun towers bent down like the heads of carrion birds. Iron claws, each one the size of a shrine, tore free of the ground and gripped the ash plain. Deep inside it, something screamed. Not one voice. Thousands. Tens of thousands. A choir of chained muscle and flayed nerve, slave bodies wired into motive cradles, their limbs sawn open and linked to pistons so that agony could be translated into motion. Demon-bound reactors pulsed beneath the screaming, their infernal heat turning the air above the engine into a shimmering bruise. The Imperial fists held formation because they were Imperial fists. Others might have scattered. Others might have mistaken sudden motion for disaster. The Sons of Dawn locked boots, braced shields, anchored themselves to the shifting deck, and returned fire at the gun ports opening around them. Bolters cracked through the rain. Heavy flamers washed over emerging murder holes. Chain fists tore at hatches even as the hatches moved away from them. Lysander stood upon the rising parapet, with rampart locked before him, the fist of dawn clenched in his right gauntlet. The wall engine shook hard. Enough to hurl mortal men to their deaths. It did not move him. Around him, icons flashed across his visor. Casualty runes, position failures, Vox interference, structural movement, enemy artillery locks multiplying beyond the horizon. Sergeant Hector Voss came over the Vox, his voice broken by static and impact thunder. The wall is translating eastward, speed increasing. Enemy guns are not firing on us. That is because they are waiting, said Tech Marine Severian. Lysander turned his helm toward the ash-veiled distance. The polluted rain thinned for a breath, and through the murk he saw the mountains ahead begin to open. They did not split by nature. They retracted. Great slabs of black stone and iron armor folded downward into the earth, revealing cannon mouths buried beneath them. Not guns placed upon mountains, guns that were mountains. Continent-bore artillery, their barrels vast enough for cathedrals to drown inside, their muzzles ringed with hazard stripes and chains of hanging corpses. Around them, smaller batteries rose in tiers, mortar pits, rocket shrines, shell silos, and lance mortars all pre-sighted upon the basin toward which the wall engine crawled. The mortar crown. The Iron Warriors had not built the first wall to stop them. They had built it to carry them. Mortar basin ahead, Severian voxed. All fire solutions converge on our current course. Impact estimates catastrophic. Voss spoke next. We can withdraw from the upper surface. Thunderhawk extraction may be possible from the western parapet. No, said Lysander. The word cut through the Vox traffic. The wall lurched beneath them, crushing an old trench line beneath its iron belly. Slaves chained inside the groundwork screamed as the engine rolled over them. Their bodies burst under its weight, blood and mud spraying from between grinding plates. The machine drank them through drainage grills without slowing. We do not retreat from a fortress because it moves, Lysander said. We enter it. We take its heart, breach downward. There was no reply for a moment. Then Voss answered with the calm of a warrior accepting the shape of his death. Breach downward, confirmed. The Imperial fists turned upon the wall itself. Chain fists bit into deck plates. Melter charges burned white against access hatches. Thunder hammers broke hinges the size of tank hulls. The surface became a storm of metal splinters and promethium fire as the fists forced entry into the moving engine beneath their feet. Iron warriors fired from murder holes built into the parapets, their bolters chattering from hidden angles. One Imperial fist took a round through the neck seal and fell without sound, blood jetting inside his helm before his armor locked upright. Another dragged him aside, not to save him, but to clear the breach lane. Lysander struck the access gate once. The fist of dawn turned the locking mechanism into molten scrap. The Imperial fists went down. Inside the wall engine, the air was heat, blood, and machine breath. Corridors of hot iron ran in crooked arteries beneath the battlements. Piston shrines hammered overhead, their sacred mechanisms wrapped in chains and strips of flayed skin. Brass valves bulged from the walls, and in several of them, demon faces pressed outward from within, mouthing curses through metal lips. Slave chains rattled through floor channels, dragging men with severed legs toward muscle mills, where their remaining strength would be harvested until death. The fists advanced through it all with storm shields edge to edge. Iron warriors fired from murder holes no wider than a gauntlet. Bolter rounds hammered rampart and the shields beside it, each detonation filling the corridor with sparks and fragments of ceramite. Heavy stubbers opened from ceiling nests. Grenades rolled from hidden chutes. Burning promethium poured from wall vents, washing over shields and turning the floor slick with cooked fat and blackened meat. Maintain lock, Voss ordered. The shield wall held. Brother Castan died with his shield still raised, a melter blast from a murder hole turning his torso into a hollowed furnace. His armor remained upright for 3 more steps before collapsing. The brother behind him stepped over the body, took the shield, and sealed the gap. That was how the Imperial fists mourned in battle. They filled the space. Severian led the second thrust toward the command, Cortex. He moved without hesitation through a maintenance artery where the floor was slick with oil, blood, and the translucent slime of ruptured spinal cables. His red armor was blackened by soot. His servo arm clicked above his shoulder like a predatory limb. Behind him came 3 battle brothers and 2 chapter serfs carrying melter packs they had no hope of surviving. The tech marine chanted in binary as he walked. His words were bursts of static, praise, threat, and command. He cut into the wall engine's nerves with a plasma cutter, severing cables that bled black oil and human spinal fluid. The fluid splashed against his greaves and steamed. One cable recoiled like a living serpent and wrapped around Brother Halbrecht's arm. Before it could drill into the joint, Severian severed it with a single precise motion. "The machine resists," Halbrecht voxed. "The machine has been taught lies," Severian replied. "I will correct it." A slave engine chamber opened before them. Hundreds of men were suspended in iron frames, their torsos split, their muscles connected to crankshafts by hooks and wire. Their faces had been removed and replaced with numbered plates. Every motion of the wall engine pulled their bodies apart a little more. Overseer servitors moved among them, injecting stimulants into hearts that should have failed days before. One of the chapter serfs vomited into his rebreather. Severian did not slow. "Burn the frames," he said. "The captives still live," the serf answered, before fear could stop him. Severian turned his helm slightly. "No, they function." The serf said nothing else. He placed the melter charge with shaking hands. Behind Lysander's spearhead, the wall engine's rib caverns opened. The Iron Warriors had prepared them perfectly. The chamber was long, high, and lined with structural ribs of black adamantium. Catwalks crossed the void between them. Firing nests covered every approach. At the far end, corrupted havocs waited behind reinforced barricades, their heavy weapons already locked on the entry lane. Among them stood obliterators, hulking things that had once been space marines and had become walking arsenals of warped flesh and metal. Their bodies shifted as the fists entered. Lascannon barrels pushed wetly from forearms. Autocannon muzzles opened through shoulder plates. Plasma coils swelled beneath skin that had the color of bruised iron. Mouths formed in their armor and laughed in static. Then the rib cavern became annihilation. Lascannon fire speared through the entry formation, cutting Brother Ormond in half at the waist. His upper body slammed into Lysander's shield and slid away, hands still clutching his bolter. Autocannon shells hammered the corridor, tearing chunks from storm shields and shredding the dead into smaller fragments. Plasma blasts burst against Terminator plate, melting ceramite into glowing slag. The Havocs fired with the pitiless accuracy of warriors who had measured every angle before the first shot. The Imperial fist suffered because the corridor had been built to make them suffer. They advanced anyway. "Shields forward!" Lysander voxed. The surviving veterans locked around him. Rampart took a Lascannon strike and threw white lightning across the chamber. Lysander felt the shock through his bones. He stepped into it. Another blast struck. He kept moving. Brother Galvor fired his assault cannon until an autocannon shell punched through the weapon housing and detonated the ammunition feed. The explosion took his arm and half his chest. He fell into the line, and Voss kicked his body aside to prevent the next brother stumbling. No insult, no apology, only war. Voss reached the left barricade first. His chain fist tore through the ironwork, then through the havoc behind it. The traitor's torso opened in a spray of black blood and fused organs. Brother Merrin took a plasma burst full in the helm, his head reduced to glowing fragments inside the collar of his armor. Lysander reached the first obliterator as it birthed a multi-melter from its chest. The Fist of Dawn struck before the weapon fired. The thunder hammer crushed the thing's upper body inward, folding armor, flesh, barrels, and bone into a smoking crater. The obliterator did not die at once. A Lascannon eye opened in its ruined abdomen. Lysander stamped down, breaking it under his boot, then hammered again until nothing remained but twitching metal and meat. The rib cavern fell by inches. Each inch cost blood. By the time Lysander reached the heart chamber, half the warriors who had entered the wall engine with him were dead, crippled, or fighting elsewhere in isolated pockets of the moving fortress. The wall engine continued crawling toward the mortar crown. Every few moments, distant impacts shook its frame as outer guns tested range. The artillery basin ahead was almost ready to speak. The heart chamber was circular, built around a throne of iron and bone. Lysander stopped at its threshold. The control throne had been made from Imperial fists, not fresh dead, older remains, armor fragments from previous wars, yellow ceramite stripped, scratched, defiled, skeletal torsos wired upright in mockery of honor guard formation, helms mounted on iron rods, their eye lenses dark, their brow plates carved with iron warriors' kill marks. Old heraldry had been scratched through and overwritten with hazard chevrons. Bones had been drilled and threaded with command cables. Hands that had once held bolters now clutched levers. Ribs served as switch housings. Spines fed into the throne's back like bundled wires. For a moment, Lysander did not move. The chamber noise receded. The guns, the screams, the roar of the wall engine. All of it fell behind the sight of yellow armor made into furniture. His hand tightened around the hammer. A voice entered the vox, distorted by machine laughter. "Your brothers held the wall for us longer than our slaves did." Lysander's reply came after a silence sharp enough to draw blood. Then they held. It was reverence. It was also a death sentence. The chamber erupted as iron warriors emerged from side alcoves, firing into the Imperial fists at close range. Lysander went through them like a breach charge. The fist of dawn caved in chests, broke helms, shattered shoulder plates, and hurled traitor bodies into the bone throne. Voss took a chain-axe strike across his breastplate and answered by driving his combat blade through the attacker's throat seal, sawing until black blood sheeted across his gauntlet. Severian reached the command cortex beneath the throne by another artery, his armor smoking, his servo arm carrying the severed head of a murder servitor, still biting at nothing. "The reactor is below," he voxed, demon-bound, integrated through captured Imperial command architecture. "Can you kill it?" Lysander asked. "No." Severian stepped over a twitching cable that had once been a man's spine. "I can make it remember ownership." He plunged his mechadendrites into the command cortex. The reaction was immediate. The wall engine screamed. Every valve face opened its mouth. Every slave in the muscle chambers convulsed. Lights across the heart chamber changed from dirty red to violent white as Severian forced Imperial rites into corrupted systems, never meant to hear them again. His binary chant became a weapon. He named the machine's stolen components. He invoked the rites of conquest. He spoke the catechisms of reclamation over cables that wept oil and blood. He forced the wall engine's outer command logic to recognize the Imperial fists as lawful holders of the captured wall, then drove that recognition downward into the diamond reactor. The diamond inside understood too late. The engine bucked. In the command cortex, Severian's armor began to burn from the inside. Warning runes crawled over his visor. His left hand blackened around the input socket. One chapter serf beside him burst apart as feedback boiled the blood in his skull. The second serf kept holding the melter pack in place while his eyes cooked white behind his lenses. "Severian," Lysander voxed. "Right incomplete. Withdraw. Denied." The tech marine drove his servo arm into the cortex and fired the plasma cutter point blank. The wall engine's heart split. Below them, the demon reactor accepted ownership, rejected corruption, accepted corruption again, then tore itself apart between contradictions. The scream that followed was not sound alone. It was heat, pressure, hatred, and prayer, forced through iron lungs. The wall engine ruptured. Fire disgorged across the ash plain in rivers. Battlements blew outward. Weapon limbs convulsed and tore themselves free. Piston shrines exploded through the upper decks, hurling gears, chains, slaves, iron warriors, and Imperial fists into the poisoned rain. The moving fortress collapsed in sections, grinding forward even as its belly opened and its organs burned. Lysander was hurled against the bone throne hard enough to crack its frame. He rose through smoke and falling ash. Rampart raised over him while pieces of the heart chamber came down. Voss dragged a wounded brother through the wreckage with one hand. Severian emerged from the command cortex wreathed in sparks, his armor scorched, his left gauntlet fused into a claw of blackened metal. "The machine is dead," the tech marine said. The wall engine gave one last lurch and stopped. For the first time since its awakening, the world beneath them was still. Then the mountains ahead fired. The mortar crown did not wait for the engine to reach the perfect center of the basin. It had never needed perfection. It needed proximity. It needed the Imperial fists fixed in place amid wreckage, committed, bloodied, slowed by victory. The horizon vanished. Continent bore guns spoke as one. The sound arrived after the light, a pressure wave that flattened ash storms and turned falling rain to steam. Shells the size of hab towers crossed the distance in shrieking arcs. The first impacts struck beyond the dead wall engine, lifting entire fields of earth and metal into the air. The second line walked closer. The third hit the wreck itself. The world became impact. Imperial fists vanished under mountains of fire. Armor plates spun through the air. Bodies were lifted, broken, and buried beneath molten stone. The dead wall engine split again as shells punched through its carcass and detonated in its lower chambers. Flames roared from every wound. Lysander braced behind Rampart as the shockwave hit. Around him, his brothers locked shields, boots, and bodies. Some held, some were gone in the first breath of the barrage. Through the thunder, Voss's Vox crackled. They sacrificed the engine. Lysander looked toward the hidden guns of the mortar crown, now roaring beneath the opened mountains. "No," he said, "they spent it." Another shell came down, and the sky fell with it. The shell storm erased the world. There was no horizon, no sky, no ground in any meaning that men had once understood. There was only impact, pressure, dust, fire, the endless hammering of guns so vast their voices arrived as weather. The mortar crown spoke from beneath its opened mountains, and each word it uttered shattered the ash plain into new shapes of ruin. The first shells had fallen like judgment. The next salvos came like industry. Crater after crater opened across the dead wall engine and the ground around it, each blast lifting tons of iron, stone, blood, and broken armor into the choking air. Imperial fists vanished beneath avalanches of pulverized rockcrete. Servitors disappeared in flashes of red vapor, their augmetic limbs spinning away through clouds of dust. Chapter serfs died with ammunition crates still locked to their harnesses, their bodies reduced to stains across the metal they had carried. The wreckage of the wall engine jumped beneath the bombardment like a carcass under the knives of butchers. Sound became meaningless. The explosions were too vast to be heard as separate things. They became pressure inside the skull. They became blood leaking from mortal ears. They became warning runes screaming across helm lenses. They became teeth cracking inside mouths clenched shut by discipline and transhuman will. Lysander stood amid the storm with Rampart raised before him. The storm shield flared again and again, its field catching fragments that would have torn a battle tank apart. Shrapnel struck it in white flashes. A shell impact nearby hurled a wave of molten grit across him, hissing over his terminator plate and hardening in black streaks across the yellow ceramite. The fist of dawn hung low in his right hand, its head dark with soot and traitor blood, its power field snarling in answer to the world's violence. Around him, the Imperial fists survived because they refused to do otherwise. They did not survive cleanly. There was no noble tableau in the storm. Brother Halbrecht lost both legs when a shell fragment sheared through the wreckage beneath him. He braced his torso against a slab of iron and continued firing until a second impact crushed him flat. Brother Siren was struck by a chunk of the dead wall engine, his helm and upper spine driven into his chest cavity, with a wet crack that even the bombardment could not entirely hide. 3 mortal ammunition bearers were thrown against Lysander's shield and burst open, painting Rampart with blood and intestine, before their remains were stripped away by the wind of the next blast. The Sons of Dawn held formation in fragments, not a line. Lines could not exist here. They held by command, rune, by oath, by the cold geometry of warriors, who understood that the enemy was not merely firing upon them. The enemy was shaping them. Tech Marine Severian's voice cut through the vox in bursts of harsh static. Pattern identified. First salvos collapse cover. Second salvos seed submunition fields. Third salvos drive survivors toward marked depressions. Fourth salvos saturate those depressions with burning contaminants. Phosphex. Sergeant Voss voxed. Phosphex derivative. Debased. Efficient. A trench to their left folded inward as a shell struck its lip. Penal thralls and combat servitors sheltering within it vanished under the collapse. Those who crawled free came out burning. Green-white chemical fire clung to their skin and armor scraps. It ate cloth, flesh, leather, and exposed bone, moving with obscene patience. One thrall ran blind across the plain, his face melting from his skull, until a second barrage erased him and those near him in a bloom of ash. The Iron Warriors were not firing randomly. One shell collapsed a trench, another opened the ground before the survivors, a third scattered mines that buried themselves beneath the dust and waited for armored weight. A fourth struck behind the Imperial line, forcing forward motion. Then the great guns paused, not from mercy, but from loading rhythm. Lysander heard it through the storm, not silence. There was no silence on Malodrax. Rhythm. The mortar crown breathed between salvos. "Advance on the count," Lysander voxed. "Move in the gun breath. 3 heartbeats between primary impacts, 6 before secondary dispersion. Mark the rhythm. Cross by sections. No hesitation." Voss answered at once. "Confirmed." Chaplain Thane's voice followed, low as a tomb door closing. "By the wall, we endure. By the breach, we advance," the surviving fists replied. They moved between the artillery's heartbeats. For 3 seconds, the ground existed. For 3 seconds, warriors rose from craters, dragged the wounded if the wounded could still fire, abandoned them if they could not, and surged across the blasted plain. Then the next salvo struck, and the world became impact again. A squad of mortal auxiliaries carrying shield stakes made it halfway across an open stretch before the Iron Warriors corrected their fire. The first shell landed behind them, pitching them forward. The second landed ahead, trapping them between craters. The third landed among them. Men became red mist, flak armor shards, and limbs tumbling through the dust. Their stakes fell uselessly into the mud. The Imperial fists did not stop for them. They counted. They advanced. They spent themselves because the objective remained ahead. From the western smoke came the heavy tread of a god of the sarcophagus. Brother Arvain Routh walked through the shell storm. The dreadnought emerged from dust and flame like a reliquary dragged from the age of legend. His sarcophagus was blackened and scarred, its yellow armor chipped down to old metal in places, its purity seals burning along the edges. Sacred oils bled from rents in his chassis, running down his legs in dark, shining trails. His assault cannon rotated with a rising shriek. His power fist opened and closed with the slow patience of a siege gate. A shell landed close enough to bury him in dirt and shrapnel. He walked out of it. "I remain," Routh said. His assault cannon opened fire. The nearest Iron Warrior's gun bunker sat half buried in a ridge of slag, its firing slit spitting autocannon rounds into the advancing fists. Routh turned toward it and filled the aperture with a storm of mass reactive fury. The bunker's front plates sparked, buckled, and then ruptured inward. The crew inside came apart under the barrage, their bodies shredded into meat threads and armor fragments that sprayed from the rear vents. A Lascannon struck Routh in the chest. The beam carved a glowing wound across his sarcophagus. More sacred oil spilled. Something inside the ancient machine wailed, perhaps warning spirit, perhaps dying, component, perhaps the old warrior within remembering pain. Routh did not slow. "Dawn sees," he said. His power fist crushed the next bunker's hatch inward. The Iron Warrior within tried to rise with a plasma gun. Routh seized him through the smoke and ground him against the bunker wall until the traitor's armor split and black blood poured between the dreadnought's fingers. He threw the ruined body aside and fired again. The mortar crown's outer batteries came into view through the dust. They were not merely gun emplacements. They were shrines of recoil and cruelty, sunk into the mountain basin in concentric tiers. Each cannon sat in a cradle of black iron, surrounded by loading gantries, ammunition lifts, slave pens, targeting pulpits, and prayer wheels made from broken Imperial aquilus. The largest barrels vanished into the mountains behind them. Every recoil sent tremors through the basin floor. Every reload consumed bodies. The Imperial fists reached the first battery during the gap between salvos. Voss led the breach. His squad descended into the gun trench under covering fire from devastators positioned among the wreckage above. Heavy bolters hammered the parapet. Lascannons cut through shielded observation posts. A melter gun reduced the first armored gate to white slag, and Voss stepped through before it finished dripping. Inside the battery, the truth waited. The gun crews were not Iron Warriors. They were Imperial prisoners, men taken long ago, men ruined beyond humanity. Their heads had been shaved and pierced with copper nails. Their eyes were gone, replaced by targeting lenses grafted into their sockets. Their mouths were stapled around brass tubes connected to rangefinders, so that each breath they took fed pressure data into the guns. Their bodies had been bolted into recoil cradles, spines locked to shock absorbers, limbs amputated and replaced with loading hooks. Many had old Imperial brands burned into their flesh. Some bore scars from captivity that matched the era of Lysander's imprisonment. They did not plead. Most had no tongues. Apothecary Brannock moved among them while bolter fire cracked overhead. His white armor was almost entirely red by then. He scanned the first prisoner with his gauntlet instruments. The Narthecium clicked and whispered. His helm turned slowly toward Lysander. Gene trace detected. Lysander looked at him. Brannock continued. Not full Astartes viability. Residual markers, tissue grafts, failed implantation. They used fragments from dead battle brothers in experiments upon these men. A shell fired from the gun above them. The recoil drove through the cradle. The prisoners wired into it convulsed as one. Bones snapped inside their restraints. One man's chest burst open from the force, and still the machine dragged data from his failing nerves. For a moment, the chamber's heat and noise became another place. Black iron hooks, a voice asking how long a son of dawn could remain useful. A table with drains beneath it. A saw. Lysander's hand tightened around the fist of dawn. "Destroy the guns," he said. Voss turned his helm toward the prisoners. "There may be minds left inside them." "There is corruption inside them," Lysander replied. "There is enemy function inside them. The objective is absolute." Brannock said nothing. He had already begun placing charges. The Imperial fists purged the battery with melter and flame. Promethium washed over recoil cradles. Men who had not spoken in years jerked and burned in their restraints, their stapled mouths glowing red around brass tubes. Melter charges fused targeting shrines into molten lumps. Severian carved through the cogitator spine with a plasma cutter, and the gun's machine spirit died vomiting scrap code through every speaker. The smell was unbearable even through helm filters. Burned flesh, sacred oil, hot brass, old blood released from pipes. Voss stood at the exit while the chamber burned behind him. "Was mercy possible?" he asked. Chaplain Thane stood beside him, Crozius dark in one hand, bolt pistol smoking in the other. His skull helm made his answer faceless. "Mercy is not always rescue," Thane said. "Sometimes mercy is denial." Voss looked back once as the flames climbed higher. Then he followed the advance. The Iron Warriors' counterattack came from below. Subterranean siege tunnels opened across the battery trench with the sound of iron teeth unlocking. Hatches blew outward. Smoke and rad haze poured from the dark. Iron Warriors' breaches emerged in brutal formation, shields forward, chain axes snarling, power mauls crackling with dirty light. Rad grenades arced through the air, bursting among the Imperial fists in clouds of invisible death that made armor sensors scream. The fighting collapsed into close, wet ugliness. Shield struck shield. Helms cracked under maul blows. Chain axes bit into ceramite and dragged out strips of fiber bundle and meat. A traitor drove his shield into Brother Lyrus, hard enough to pin him against the gun cradle, then rammed a chain axe beneath his gorget. The teeth caught. Blood sprayed inside Lyrus's helm grill and jetted from the neck seal. Voss smashed the Iron Warrior aside with his own shield, then punched his chain fist through the traitor's ribcage. The weapon chewed through armor, lungs, spine, and backpack reactor in a single shrieking burst. Lysander met the center of the counterattack. An Iron Warrior champion swung a power maul at his head. Rampart caught the blow. The Fist of Dawn answered. The hammer struck the traitor's shoulder and drove him sideways into two of his brothers, crushing all three into a tangle of armor and broken limbs. Another came low with a chain axe. Lysander stepped onto the weapon, pinned it, and drove his boot through the warrior's knee. The joint exploded backward. Before the traitor fell, Lysander crushed his helm flat. Brother Routh entered the tunnel mouth like a walking tomb. "Open!" the dreadnought said. His assault cannon fired down the confined passage. The tunnel became a red storm. Iron Warriors' breeches were shredded in place, their shields punched through, their bodies hammered apart, their black blood painting the walls. A rad grenade burst against Routh's chassis. Warning runes flared across nearby helms. The Ancient One continued firing. "Open!" he repeated. The Imperial fists forced their way through the counterattack and into the primary artillery sanctum. The largest guns of the Mortar Crown loomed above them, each one fed by ammunition chains and prisoner cradles, each one tied into the mountain by cables thick as towers. Severian reached the central cogitator, while his brothers died around him. He drove both mechadendrites into the access shrine and ripped its data core free. The last of the Mortar Crown's guns fired as the melter charges detonated. The barrels split along its length. The mountain above it cracked. Fire climbed through the ammunition vaults and found the shell stockpiles waiting there. The explosion rolled outward through the basin, not as a single blast, but as a chain of suns being born under the earth. Gun after gun died. Batteries folded inward. Recoil shrines collapsed. Prisoner cradles burned. Iron Warriors were thrown from gantries like broken dolls. The Mortar Crown, which had spoken with the voice of mountains, choked on its own fire. When the thunder faded, the basin was a smoking wound. The Imperial fists stood within it bloodied, blackened, diminished. Victory had been taken. Not won cleanly. Taken. Severian held the ripped data core in his scorched gauntlet. Its casing pulsed with dying light, still transmitting on a buried channel. He forced it open with a burst of Binharic command. The final message spilled into the Imperial Voxnet before dissolving into static. Kulgard had sealed itself. All outer gates locked. All retreat corridors collapsed. All slave districts marked for sacrifice. Population stock transferred from labor value to ritual value. Pain engines awakening beneath the city. The next defense layer rising from dormancy. The Iron Litany had begun. Lysander stood among the corpses and burning guns, his armor dripping with ash rain and blood. Beyond the basin, through the smoke, the fortress city waited behind its black walls. Chaplain Thane looked toward it. They are killing their own world to keep us from its heart. Lysander lifted the Fist of Dawn from the ruin at his feet. Then we will reach the heart before it finishes dying. Kulgard rose from the ash like a city built by hatred and taught to prey in artillery fire. Its walls were black, not with paint, but with centuries of promethium smoke, furnace soot, and blood baked into iron until color itself had been murdered. The fortress city did not sprawl, it clenched. Every district had been compressed behind walls within walls, each barrier raised in brutal obedience to function. Hab blocks had been gutted and reforged into ammunition silos. Streets had been narrowed into fire corridors. Towers rose without ornament. Their crowns not spires, but cathedral guns, vast barrels mounted where sanctified bells might have hung on loyal worlds. Chain lifts the size of hab-blocks moved between the lower manufactoria and the upper bastions, hauling shells, slaves, corpses, and broken engines in endless procession. The gates were banded in hazard stripes, iron, yellow, and black, each stripe wide enough for a battle tank to crawl across. The largest of them faced the Imperial approach, a slab of adamantium and black stone, known by the traitors as the Gate of Nails. It was not named for decoration. Its surface was studded with thousands of spikes, hooks, clamps, and crucifixion spars. Bodies hung there in layered curtains, some ancient and dry as parchment, others fresh enough to steam in the chemical rain. There were broken aquilers among them, torn scraps of yellow ceramite, fragments of purity seals nailed through human tongues. Coolguard was not a place where men lived. It was a place where men were used. The manufactoria burned through day and night, though Malodrax had little meaning for either. Firelight pulsed beneath the low clouds. Forges belched columns of black smoke into the poisoned sky. Slave horns moaned from the lower districts, answered by the grinding of chain engines and the wet thunder of furnace mouths opening to receive bodies. The city had no parks, no plazas, no shrines to mercy. Every surface existed to bear weight, channel fire, withstand bombardment, or break an attacker's will. It was a hymn to Perturabo's lesson, sung in iron and recoil, function without mercy. Before it, the Imperial fists prepared the siege. They did not rush. They did not scream insults at the wall. They did not waste ammunition in anger. The Sons of Dawn became what they had always been beneath heraldry and oath. Patient, methodical, unyielding. Combat servitors cut trenches into the poisoned ground with rotary saws and claw plows, their pallid bodies shaking under the strain as they dragged revetment plates into position. Chapter serfs raised shield generators beneath the gaze of tech marines, each generator anointed with oil, blood, and Binharic invocation. Whirlwinds crawled into firing pits, their missile racks elevating toward the fortress city. Vindicators took their places in the forward line, siege shields lowered, demolisher cannons aimed at the Gate of Nails. Thunderfire cannons were calibrated atop broken slabs of the dead wall engine, their tech marine gunners adjusting angles by fractions while shells burst in the distance. Devastator squads occupied overlapping fire lanes. Lascannons watched the gate towers. Heavy bolters covered murder slits. Missile launchers waited upon the parapet crests. Plasma cannons hummed behind blast screens, their coils glowing with restrained sunfire. The air stank of hot metal, promethium, and the corpse-rich mud of the shell fields. Lysander walked the forming siege line without haste. The Fist of Dawn rested in his right hand. Rampart hung on his left arm, its surface scarred by the mortar crown's fury. His armor still bore blackened streaks from the wall engine's death, but the heraldry remained visible beneath the grime. That mattered, not as vanity, as defiance. The Iron Warriors would see yellow at their gate. They would see the Sons of Dawn come against them in the colors they had failed to break. Sergeant Voss met him beside the forward Vindicator line. His squad had been rebuilt from survivors of Bastion Null, the First Wall, and the Mortar Crown. Every warrior bore fresh damage. No plate was unscarred. No oath seal was clean. "Demolisher batteries are ready," Voss said. "Thunderfire solutions confirmed. Devastators report clear sight to the upper murder galleries." Enemy response? Measured, too measured. Lysander looked toward the walls. They are listening. They have given us 3 false breaches. East Bastion, Lower Culvert, Western Chain Yard. Auspex returns, show weakened plates. Traps? Yes. The Iron Warriors had answered the siege with mastery of their own. They projected decoy void shields over empty courtyards. They opened false breaches with obvious structural flaws, baiting assault. Craft toward kill pockets. They triangulated Imperial artillery by letting lesser towers die under bombardment, then fired counter-battery salvos from guns buried beneath hab districts. They collapsed tunnels before Imperial breaches could enter, crushing squads of combat servitors and burying melter charges beneath tons of rockcrete. They launched sacrificial sorties from side gates, not to win ground, but to force the Imperial fists to reveal response times and reserve positioning. These were not mere traitors with guns. They were siege masters whose bitterness had been refined over 10,000 years into doctrine. Every loss they suffered was filed, measured, and used. Every slave they spent bought a correction. Every corpse on the field became part of an equation. An encrypted vox rune flared across Lysander's helm display. The voice that followed was formal, distant, disciplined. "This is Captain Aurelius of the Ultramarines detachment in holding orbit. Our strike cruisers are positioned to reinforce. We can commit assault reserves to your northern vector and reduce projected casualties." Another signal bled into the channel, warmer in tone, but no less martial. "Blood Angel's elements stand ready to descend upon your mark. Say the word, Captain Lysander, and Kulgard's walls will drown beneath angels." Lysander stood in the rain and watched the gate of nails. "No." A pause answered him. Void distance made it longer. The Ultramarine spoke again. "Your forces have already taken severe losses. A combined action will shorten the siege. Your offer is acknowledged. Then you refuse it." "I refuse it." The Blood Angel's voice hardened. "Pride kills, son of dawn." Lysander ended the channel. Voss said nothing. No brother near him did. The refusal passed down the line not as surprise, but as weight. Every warrior understood its meaning. Every warrior understood that men who might have lived would now die. Every warrior accepted that the wound of Malodrax would be closed by Imperial fists' hands, or not at all. Chaplain Thane found Lysander in a half-built command trench, beneath the shadow of a shield generator. The chaplain had removed his helm. Ash had gathered in the lines of his face. His crozius rested against his shoulder, its skull head darkened by soot. "You should have accepted them," Thane said. Lysander watched serfs drag ammunition crates into place. Several bled from the nose and ears from artillery pressure. They did not stop. "No. This fortress does not care whose hand breaks it. The dead will not know their killers wore yellow, blue, or red. We will know. That is not strategy. It is necessity." Thane stepped closer. "Name it correctly. It is vengeance." Lysander turned then. The coldness in him did not flare. It deepened. "Malodrax is an Imperial fist's wound," he said. "It took our blood. It displayed our dead. It used our brothers as furniture, as mechanisms, as mockery. It is our wound, chaplain. It will be closed by our hands. Wounds rot beneath sealed armor." Lysander stared at him for a long moment. Around them, the siege line continued to form. Trenches deepened, shields rose, engines growled, men prepared to die. "Then we cut deeper," Lysander said. The first breach began when the Vindicators fired. The Demolisher cannons spoke together, and the ground recoiled. Shells struck the Gate of Nails with such force that the hanging bodies across its face became red vapor and flying bone. The gate did not fall. The first impacts merely peeled away outer plates, exposing deeper layers of adamantium ribbing and black rockcrete. The second volley punched craters into the surface. The third tore open the lower hinge shrine, and molten metal poured down the gate like blood from a split throat. Thunderfire cannons joined the bombardment, their shells walking across the upper murder galleries. Devastator Lascannons cut through flak turrets and observation lenses. Whirlwind rockets screamed overhead and burst among the wall crews, scattering Iron Warriors' thralls from parapets in burning pieces. Then the Terminators advanced. Lysander led them beneath locked storm shields, the first rank moving through a storm of enemy fire. Bolter rounds detonated against rampart. Autocannon shells sparked from shields. Lascannon beams burned the air white. The Iron Warriors waited until the Imperial... Fists reached the killing apron before they opened the murder slits. Molten slag poured from the wall. It fell in glowing sheets, thick and heavy, striking shields with a sound like hammers beating meat. Brother Caldrus took the full weight of a slag cascade. His storm shield held for 3 heartbeats. Then the heat ate through the field edge and spilled over his helm and shoulders. He remained upright, blocking the flow for the brothers behind him, until his armor seals failed and his body cooked inside the plate. When he finally fell, he fell forward. The line stepped over him. Iron chains launched from slots in the gate, each one tipped with hooks and magnetic clamps. A fallen Terminator was seized before Apothecary Brannock could reach him. The hooks bit into his armor, dragged him upward, and slammed him against the gate of nails. More hooks drove through his limbs, pinning him there among the corpses. His life rune flickered. Not dead, not yet. Brannock moved toward him. The ground beneath the apothecary erupted. A buried siege mine detonated under the recovery path. The blast threw Brannock backward, shattered 2 serfs into bloody mist, and opened a crater filled with burning fragments. Another apothecary moved to continue the retrieval and was cut apart by heavy bolter fire from a hidden side embrasure, his white armor bursting under the impacts. The trapped Terminator on the gate voxed once. "Do not spend the breach on me." Lysander heard him. "Your name will be carried," he answered. Then he ordered the advance. The Imperial fists hit the gate beneath a storm of slag, chains, bolter fire, and collapsing stone. Chain fists screamed against the weakened hinge ribs. Melter charges burned white at the base. Lysander raised the Fist of Dawn and struck the cracked seam where the demolisher shells had done their work. The first blow shook the gate. The second widened the wound. The third broke it. The gate of nails caved inward, not cleanly, but in a catastrophe of metal, bodies, hooks, molten slag, and pulverized stone. Terminators surged through the falling wreckage into a kill chamber beyond, and the massacre began in earnest. Iron warriors waited inside behind breacher shields and overlapping heavy weapons. The first rank of Imperial fists vanished under plasma and autocannon fire. Brother Serivan's helm burst like a fruit beneath a direct hit. Brother Androcles took a melter beam through the chest and kept walking long enough to crush a traitor beneath his body.
Remember, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Support helps.
Voss drove through the smoke with his chain fist raised, carving into the Iron Warrior's shield wall, while his storm bolter hammered at point-blank range. Brother Arvain Routh entered behind them. The dreadnought strode through the gate breach like a walking relic of wrath, a salt cannon roaring. He tore open a gun nest with sustained fire, then crushed a breacher under his power fist until the traitor's armor folded inward and black blood sprayed from every joint. Lascannon fire struck him from above. He turned into it. "I remain," Routh voxed. The ceiling collapsed. The Iron Warriors had built adamantium ribs above the gate chamber, each one wired with charges. They detonated them as Routh crossed the threshold. The ribs fell like the bones of a murdered titan. The dreadnought vanished beneath them. Dust and sparks filled the breach. His life rune flickered red, then amber, then red again. His assault cannon continued firing from beneath the rubble. "I remain," he said. The cannon roared. "I remain!" Iron warriors died in the smoke, cut apart by fire from a sarcophagus buried under tons of metal. "I remain!" The words became a tomb prayer across the Vox. Then the Iron warriors escalated. Across the battlefield, every external Vox shrine and sonic projector along the walls of Kulgard awakened. At first there was only static. Then came a sound that made every Imperial fist halt for less than a heartbeat. A voice, Lysander's voice, not the voice of command, not the iron tone of the first captain. This was older, raw, dragged from the vaults of Malodrax's cruelty. A strained breath, a grunt of pain bitten down too late, the clink of chains, Iron Warriors' voices asking questions in the background, a wet mechanical sound, another breath, forced through teeth. The recording rolled across the siege line as sonic artillery. It did not break Lysander. It was not meant to. It struck his brothers instead. They heard their captain in captivity. They heard the sound the enemy had stolen from him. They heard pain made into a weapon and hurled back across years. A lesser force might have been driven into rage. A less disciplined force might have charged blindly. The Imperial fists faltered only long enough to hate with greater precision. Lysander stood amid the breach smoke, helm lenses fixed upon the inner streets of Kulgard. His hands were steady. "All Vox channels," he ordered. "Narrow to command cant. Filter all enemy sound." Severian answered from the rear lines, complying. The stolen voice became muffled, then distant, then nothing. Lysander spoke to the chapter. "They have used my voice. Answer with yours." Chaplain Thane raised his Crozius. The battle oath began low, carried first by the warriors in the breach, then by those in the trenches, then by the devastators on the ridge, then by the serfs and mortal crew who could still stand. It was not a song. It had no beauty. It was a rhythm of stone and hate, an oath beaten into the air by voices trained for war. By dawn, we endure. The Imperial fists advanced. By terror, we hold. They stepped through the corpses of their brothers and enemies alike. By the Emperor, we strike. The Iron Warriors poured fire into them from both sides of the breach, but the chant continued, harsh and deep, echoing beneath the artillery and the burning gates. Storm shields locked, bolters fired, thunder hammers rose and fell, chain fists opened armor and flesh. The Sons of Dawn entered Kulgard through blood, slag, and the weaponized memory of their captain's pain. Inside the gate, the city did not open into streets as cities should. It arranged itself. The first avenue angled left, then divided into 3 corridors of fire. The hab towers overlooking it had no windows, only weapon slits. The ground bore pressure seams. The walls carried hidden Vox repeaters. Drainage channels ran uphill by mechanical pump, carrying blood toward cogitator shrines instead of away from them. Every route invited movement. Every invitation smelled of murder. Severian reached the inner control node beside the ruined gate and drove his mechadendrite into it. His armor locked rigid as data flooded through him. The city's machine spirit did not speak from a single throne. It came from everywhere. Walls, streets, lifts, guns, drains, doors, furnaces, slave collars, and buried engines all answered in one hateful murmur. He withdrew the tendril slowly. Lysander looked to him. "Where is the command throne?" Severian's helm turned toward the streets of Kulgard. "There is no central throne," he said. "The city is the throne." The ground trembled beneath them. Gates sealed in the distance. Gun shutters opened. Chain lifts began to move. Somewhere deep below, the iron litany pulsed once, and every wall in Kulgard seemed to listen. Severian's voice lowered into static. "The streets are not streets. They are equations." Ahead, the city waited for the Imperial fists to solve them in blood. Kulgard did not yield streets to the invader. It offered wounds. The first avenue beyond the Gate of Nails ran straight for 200 meters before it kinked left, at an angle too precise to be natural and too cruel to be accidental. Its paving stones were black iron plates, each one riveted over old corpses, each seam wide enough to hide a pressure wire, a mine tooth, or the listening lens of a murder servitor buried beneath the road. The buildings on either side had once been hab blocks, or something like them, but the Iron Warriors had hollowed them out and given them a better purpose. Every window had been sealed, every doorway had been reduced to a firing slit, every arch concealed a gun, every shrine niche held a censer skull, every alleyway was a throat waiting to bite. The Imperial fists advanced meter by meter. No brother moved alone, no bolter fired without purpose, No shield lifted without another locking beside it. Devastators took the rear elevations and fired into shadowed apertures until the stone around them burst and bodies tumbled out in pieces. Terminators moved at the center, storm shields raised, the fist of dawn among them like a relic dragged to execution. Tactical squads spread through the lower approaches, marking doors, cutting hinges, burning chambers, clean before stepping inside. Tech Marines sent Auspex cherubs into corridors first and watched them vanish in flashes of white fire, then marked the flash pattern and adjusted the advance. Coolguard answered every correction with another layer of hate. A false barricade collapsed when the first melter charge touched it, exposing a sunken gun pit filled with autocannons. 3 Imperial fists died in the opening burst, their chest plates punched apart, their hearts and secondary organs pulped inside their armor before their bodies finished falling. A hab block to the right opened its entire face in a cascade of shutters, revealing Iron Warriors' havocs kneeling behind braced heavy bolters. Their fire turned the street into a tunnel of detonations. Chunks of ceramite spat from shields. A mortal serf carrying ammunition was hit, and his torso burst across the back of Brother Halvor's greaves in a wet red fan. Lysander watched the pattern form. This was not defense in the simple sense. It was examination. Each district posed a question. Each dead brother, each spent magazine, each delayed order was an answer fed into the city's hidden mind. Faith, ammunition, formation discipline, command speed, casualty tolerance, willingness to sacrifice. The Iron Warriors had split the battlefield into proofs, and somewhere beneath the city, warsmith Barak Torval was measuring the Sons of Dawn as if they were a wall under load. The Vox carried a burst of enemy cant, harsh and contemptuous, riding the static between artillery impacts. "Come, Masons, bring your little shields, stack your dead higher. Perhaps they will make a wall worth breaking." Sergeant Voss answered without anger. "Breach marked." A crack missile from the rear line struck the speaking tower halfway up its height. The detonation blew out the interior, and several traitor thralls fell burning through the smoke. Another Iron Warrior voice laughed across a local grill. "Corpse wallers, Dawn's obedient stones. You advance because you have forgotten how to think." "Target judged," said Brother Madron. His Lascannon fired. The grill, the wall around it, and the legionary behind it became molten ruin. "Wall taken," said another. "Proceed," Lysander commanded. They proceeded. Voss led his squad into a broad procession road that the city's map named the Avenue of Broken Helms. The name appeared in Severian's stolen data as a warning rune, not because the Iron Warriors wished to hide it, but because they wanted the Imperial fists to know. The avenue's paving was made from captured Space Marine helmets, not only Imperial fists. Voss saw blue, red, black, green, and grey beneath the soot and iron dust. But most were yellow. Some had been flattened by presses into shallow masks. Some had been set whole into the road, eye lenses staring upward beneath layers of transparent armor glass. Many bore names scratched away by knife points. Some still had fragments of skull inside them, visible through cracks where wheels and boots had worn the plate thin. Brother Cadron slowed by half a step. Voss saw it. "Eyes forward," he voxed. "They set our dead beneath our feet. They set bait beneath our feet. Step over them. Do not look down." The squad obeyed. They were halfway across when the avenue rose around them. Graviton mines ignited beneath the embedded helms, and the road buckled as gravity twisted in broken circles. Brother Cadron was hurled downward with such force that his knees punched through the iron plates, locking him in place. Brother Athion lifted from the ground and struck an overhead gantry, armor first, hard enough to dent the beam. Before he could recover, the hab blocks on either side opened. Iron Warriors' breaches emerged from hidden doorways, shields forward, Volkite relic weapons glowing like caged suns in their hands. The first Volkite beam struck Brother Cadron in the chest. His armor reddened, then whitened. Flesh inside flashed to steam. His helm lenses burst outward as the heat cooked his skull from within. A second beam cut across Brother Athion while he hung pinned above the street, and his body came apart in a cascade of burning armor fragments and boiling blood. "Lock boots," Voss ordered. The gravitic pressure tried to fold him into the road. He bent with it, joints screaming, mag boots biting, then raised his storm bolter and fired into the nearest breach's faceplate. The bolt detonated inside the helm. The traitor's head vanished in a black burst, and his body kept walking for 2 steps before toppling over a row of dead helmets. "Shields left, fire right, step over the remains." Brother Solm hesitated at the sight of Cadron's trapped body. The fallen warrior's life rune still flickered. "Step over him," Voss said. Cadron heard. "I hold." The trapped brother fired from where the mine had pinned him. Volkite light washed over his armor again. He kept firing until his ammunition counter ran dry. Then he drew his sidearm and fired that. Voss stepped past him without looking down and drove his chain fist into the enemy line. Teeth screamed through breacher's shield, arm, chest, and spine. Black blood sprayed across the embedded helms. The avenue drank it through thin drainage channels. Behind the forward advance, Apothecary Brannock moved through the dead. He was not gentle. No apothecary of the Adeptus Astartes could afford gentleness in such a place. He was a butcher priest of continuity, a guardian of gene seed, a white-armored executioner of delay. Bolt rounds hammered his plate as he knelt beside Brother Halvor's corpse. The fallen warrior's torso had been opened by auto-cannon fire. Brannock widened the wound with sacred tools, ignoring the rounds sparking from his pauldron, ignoring the red mist of another serf dying nearby, ignoring the tremor of mines beneath the street. His narthecium unfolded in quick, precise motions. Blades entered. Clamps spread. The progenoid was removed in a gush of blood and warm fluid. Brannock sealed it in a stasis vial, marked the dead brother's name, and moved to the next body. A La round struck his helm and cracked one lens. He did not look up. A wounded Imperial fist reached for him from beneath a slab of masonry, armor crushed flat across the legs. "Brannock." The apothecary knelt. "Can you recover me?" Brannock scanned him. The answer came in 3 heartbeats. "No." The wounded brother nodded once, "Then recover what matters." Brannock cut him open while he still lived. The brother did not scream. He recited the catechism of the wall until his voice drowned in blood. When Brannock rose, the vial in his hand held the future of a warrior who would never stand again. That was mercy enough for Coolguard. Lysander pushed deeper. The city narrowed around him, street by street, proof by proof. He began to recognize angles, not from tactical study, from memory. A stairwell descending beneath an arch of black iron, a ceiling hook shaped like a claw, a wall shrine made from empty restraint collars, a drainage channel too narrow for armor, but wide enough for blood. He had seen these things from below, years before, when pain had measured time more honestly than clocks. Coolguard was not merely a fortress city. It was a memory palace built to humiliate him. The Iron Warriors had preserved corridors from his captivity and repeated them in the streets above. Torture chambers had been given civic placement. Execution galleries had become intersections. Cells had been raised into ornamental facades. His suffering had not been hidden. It had been architecturally honored. Chaplain Thane walked near him, Crozius in hand, skull helm sealed. The chaplain did not speak of what he saw. That restraint was either wisdom or judgment. The next manufactorum opened like a wound in the side of the city. Its doors had been blown inward by Vindicator fire, but the interior still lived. Assembly rails hung from the ceiling in rows, bearing half-born demon engines made from battle tanks, corpse pulp, warp metal, chains, and screaming machine spirits. Some were no more than turrets fused to rib cages of iron. Others had legs grown from piston clusters and spined armor plating. One had the front of a rhino transport for a skull and a furnace full of human bones for a belly. They hung from hooks and rails, twitching as the battle's vibrations woke them. Warpsmith Kadrak Foal's voice oozed from every speaker inside the manufactorum. See what iron becomes when it is freed from your corpse god's superstition. See function, see appetite, see the future of fortresses that walk. Burn it, Lysander said. The Imperial fists opened fire. Melter beams cut through assembly chains. Plasma blasts punched into half-formed reactors. Heavy flamers washed over exposed muscle cables and stitched skin. A demon engine no larger than a predator tank woke, fully enough to scream, before Brother Varus drove a crack grenade into its open mouth and blew its head apart. Another broke one leg free and crawled toward the line, dragging its unfinished rear half behind it, excreting sparks and clots of black oil. Voss mounted its hull and carved down through the engine housing with his chain fist until the thing spasmed and died beneath him. A rail line tore from the ceiling. Something enormous dropped into the manufactorum floor. The Bastion Eater unfolded from its chains. It was a walking siege maw, built to chew fortifications and reduce walls to molten waste. Its body was low, broad, and armored in overlapping plates of black iron. At its front yawned a grinding mouth of rotating adamantium teeth, furnace-lit from within. Behind the maw, vents opened and closed like gills, exhaling slag smoke. Its legs were hydraulic pillars, ending in clawed traction pads. Its skull reactor sat behind a cage of warp metal, pulsing with red light, and the silhouette of a bound thing beating itself against confinement. Kadrak Foal laughed, and the sound came out as machine static. Let us test the masons against a better mouth. The Bastion Eater charged. Brother Varus's combat squad stood in its path. They fired as one. Bolters, plasma, melter. The shots struck, burned, gouged, and vanished into armor designed to survive siege lines. The demon engine hit them like a collapsing wall. Its maw opened. The first Imperial fist disappeared waist first, armor screaming as the teeth took him. The machine chewed through ceramite, bone, organs, power plant, and sacred heraldry, then excreted molten slag from vents beneath its belly. Another brother was dragged in by a hooked tongue of chain links and crushed flat before he reached the teeth. A third tried to leap aside and was pinned under one traction claw, his body bursting under the weight. The entire squad died in seconds. Armor and flesh went into the mouth. Slag came out. Lysander advanced toward it, but the manufactorum floor split between him and the machine. Iron Warriors' havocs fired from the gantries, forcing the Imperial fists into cover. Volkite beams burned through smoke. Autocannon shells ripped across the floor. The Bastion Eater turned toward the next squad, furnace maw grinding, hungry to make more yellow armor into waste. Then an old signal returned on the Vox, faint, broken, buried beneath layers of rubble and interference. I remain. The wall to the manufactorum's left exploded inward. Brother Arvain Routh emerged from the ruin. The dreadnought was torn open. His sarcophagus casing had been split along one side. Wires dragged from him like entrails. His assault cannon hung damaged, rotating in fits. Fire burned across his chassis. Sacred oils poured from him in dark streams, and each step left smoking footprints in the manufactorum grime. The Bastion Eater turned. Routh walked into its charge. "Stone stands," he said. The demon engine hit him. The impact drove the dreadnought backward across the floor, gouging trenches in the iron. Its maw closed around his left side, teeth shrieking against ancient armor. Routh drove his power fist into the upper jaw and held it open. Pistons screamed. Armor split. The demon engine's furnace breath washed over him, burning away purity seals, paint, and exposed cables. "Now!" Routh voxed. Lysander came through the fire. The Havocs tried to stop him. Voss and the surviving Imperial fists cut them down, storm bolters hammering gantries until traitors fell broken from above. Lysander crossed the manufactorum floor at a run, the fist of dawn roaring awake in his hand. Routh held the maw open. The Bastion Eater ground deeper into him. The dreadnought's sarcophagus cracked. For a moment, through the rent in the casing, something old and pale could be seen within, suspended in amniotic fluid and pain. A warrior who had not possessed flesh enough to kneel for centuries and had chosen to stand anyway. "I remain," he whispered. Lysander leapt onto the demon engine's skull cage. The fist of dawn fell. The first blow cracked the warp metal. The second drove the cage inward. The third smashed the skull reactor open. Red light burst upward, full of faces, claws, and furnace screams. The bound demon tried to escape through the wound. Lysander hammered it again. The reactor imploded in a storm of black flame and molten brass. The Bastion Eater died biting down. Its maw closed around Routh and crushed him into itself as it collapsed. The dreadnought's life rune flared white, then vanished. His chassis and the demon engine fell together, fused in death, a fortress that had chosen to walk locked forever inside the jaws of a fortress made to devour. No one spoke for several breaths. Then Lysander stepped down from the dead engine. "Record, Brother Arvane Routh," he said. He held. Chaplain Thane bowed his skull helm. "He remains." The words passed through the vox like a funeral bell, but the war did not pause to honor them. Kulgard still lived. The iron litany still pulsed below. The city's proofs continued to unfold in blood and fire. Beyond the manufactorum, the streets descended. Not by accident, not by damage. The passage ahead sloped into older stone and darker iron, away from the city's active gun levels and toward the depths beneath Kulgard. The walls changed there. They lost the newer plates and hazard markings. They became black, cold, and close. Chains hung from the ceiling. Old vox horns waited like dead mouths. The air smelled of rust, stale blood, and memories Lysander had never spoken aloud. He knew the descent. Chaplain Thane knew that he knew it. "The prison levels," Severian said over the vox. "Old structure, active power, multiple life signs, multiple false life signs. The city is drawing us downward." Voss turned toward Lysander. "Orders?" Lysander looked into the dark. For a heartbeat, he was not in the street. He was beneath it, bound, measured, opened, watched by iron helms that wanted him to become less than himself. Then the moment passed. "I lead the descent personally," he said. No one argued. Chaplain Thane fell into step behind him without a word. Crozius held ready, his silence heavier than accusation. The chaplain had watched the city sharpen itself around Lysander's memories. He had seen vengeance become navigation. He had seen the first captain move not only toward an objective, but toward a wound that still had teeth. The Imperial fists descended into the old prison levels, and Kulgard closed above them like a fist. The prison levels breathed beneath Kulgard. They were older than the fortress city above, older than the present configuration of walls and guns, older perhaps than the Iron Warrior's full dominion over Malodrax. The descent left behind the heat of Manufactoria and the thunder of surface artillery. It passed below the killing avenues, below the chain lifts and corpse drains, below the bastion engines and command vanes, into a place where sound became close and wet and personal. Black iron lined the walls, not blackened by soot, but born black, forged in furnaces that had never known clean flame. Ritual hooks hung from ceiling tracks, some empty, some still bearing scraps of dried flesh, some polished by long use. Stasis cages stood recessed into the walls, their glass fronts misted from within, their occupants too withered to identify as men or corpses. Bone script covered the support pillars, carved into femurs and ribs wired together into plaques. Names, dates, pain tolerances, confession durations, failure thresholds. The Imperial fists moved in tight formation through the corridor, storm bolters raised, helm lenses burning in the gloom. Their boots struck the floor in steady rhythm. Each footfall echoed down the passage like a verdict delivered in armor. There was no massed enemy before them now, no artillery crowns, no demon engines grinding through smoke, no shield walls of iron warriors waiting under banners of bitter iron. The enemy here was architecture, memory, silence corrupted by design. The silence watched them. Lysander advanced at the center of the formation. Rampart was locked to his arm. The Fist of Dawn hung low, its head brushing the air above the floor, its power field restrained, but hungry. Chaplain Thane walked at his right, Crozius ready. Apothecary Brannock followed with his Narthecium folded against his gauntlet, white armor marked by old blood and new soot. Sergeant Voss held the rearward angle with his squad, every warrior scanning the alcoves, cages, and ceiling rails. The corridor narrowed. Lysander knew that it would. He knew the angle of the turn before he reached it. He knew the sound the iron grating would make beneath Terminator weight. He knew where the ceiling dipped low enough that as suspended, prisoners' feet would scrape the floor when the hooks were drawn backward. He knew that the left wall would bear a drainage channel too shallow to carry away all the blood, so it would stain, clot, and dry in layered ridges. He knew the scent before his helm filters named it. Old blood, old fear, old iron. His hearts beat once, twice, slow and controlled. The cell waited at the end of the passage. It had been preserved perfectly. The door stood open, a slab of reinforced iron scarred by blows that had done nothing. The chamber beyond was small by the scale of Astartes' war, large by the scale of human torment. There was no bed, no bench, no shrine, no concession to the idea that the body held within it required anything but endurance and punishment. Rings were set into the walls and floor. Chains hung from them, heavy enough to anchor a dreadnought sarcophagus, each link etched with tiny kill marks. A drain sat at the center of the floor. Its grooves were dark. Lysander stepped inside. The old blood remained in the channels. His blood, not all of it. Not enough to matter to flesh, perhaps, but enough to matter to memory. Enough for the iron warriors to leave it there, protected beneath a thin layer of preservative resin, displayed as proof that even the unbroken could be made to bleed on command. His chains had been mounted opposite the door, not discarded, not hidden, mounted. They hung upon a rack of black iron like relics in a chapel. Each shackle bore engraved data tags, duration, pressure, injury, response, silence interval, vocalization threshold. The Iron Warriors had not treated his defiance as victory over them, nor even as failure on their part. They had catalogued it, studied it, repurposed it. To them, endurance was just another material. Defiance was ore. Pain was the furnace. All things could be rendered useful if broken into their correct measurements. Chaplain Thane stood at the threshold. "This is why they left it," he said. Lysander did not turn. "Yes. To draw you inward. Yes. And you came. Yes." The word was calm. Too calm. A Vox spirit awakened in the walls. At first it was a click, soft as a restraint being locked around a wrist. Then came static, old and grainy, drawn from degraded memory coils. The air inside the cell thickened with the recorded presence. A voice emerged, dry, patient, cruel without heat. "Again, son of dawn, tell me the path you took through the lower galleries. Tell me what opened the gate. Tell me what whispered when the lights died." Lysander stood motionless. The voice continued, Shontu's voice, or a crafted echo of it. The timbre was familiar enough that Voss shifted his weapon toward the walls, as though a bolter could kill the past. "You endured the hooks. You endured the nerve sores. You endured deprivation, poison, pressure, the little knives, the deep knives, the quiet hours, the screaming hours. Admirable, predictable, Dawn built stubborn suns, but stubbornness did not open your cell. The vox crackled. Beneath it came another sound, a younger breath, harsh, controlled, refusing to become a scream. Lysander's breath. Strength did not free you, the voice whispered. Purity did not guide you. Something spoke in the dark beneath Malodrax. Something you listened to because even stone desires release when buried deep enough. Tell them, Captain. Tell your brothers what bargain wears the mask of survival. The recording died into static. No one moved. Chaplain Thane entered the cell. His skull helm turned toward Lysander. Truth, first captain. Lysander's fingers flexed around the hammer haft. This is enemy craft. Yes. Then treat it as such. I am. The words struck harder than accusation. Outside the cell, the corridor groaned faintly. Somewhere deeper in the prison levels, metal shifted. The fortress listened. Thane lowered his crozier slightly. Did you bargain? The question filled the cell more completely than any roar could have done. Lysander looked at the chains mounted on the wall. I escaped. That is not an answer. I used what I had. What did you have? Enemy arrogance, prisoner roots, dead men who still knew how to hate their masters. A map built from screams through walls. Timing. Patience. Thane waited. Lysander's voice lowered. And knowledge from places that should have been silent. Voss's squad held the corridor beyond, weapons raised. None of them spoke. Brannock's cracked helm lens reflected the cell's black iron. Thane said, From whom? Lysander did not answer at once. The chains swayed, though no wind entered the room. Not whom, he said at last. The chaplain's grip tightened on his crozius. The prison levels sealed. Blast doors dropped throughout the corridor, each one slamming down with enough force to shake dust from the ceiling. Red lumen strips ignited in the walls. The stasis cages opened in sequence, releasing cold vapor and the stink of preserved death. Vox horns coughed static. From the side chambers came the sound of armor dragging across stone. The dead rose. They came from the cages first. Loyalist corpses in cracked armor. Some wore the yellow of Imperial fists, others colors faded by blood and frost. Their heraldry had been scratched, defiled, overwritten with iron warriors' marks, then restored badly in mockery. Bones showed through armor joints. Skulls moved inside helms split by old blows. Dead hands clenched bolters without magazines, broken swords, torn banners, chains, and pieces of their own burial frames. Warp light burned in their eye lenses. They were not alive. They were not honored dead. They were puppets, animated by spite, corpses made to walk so that the sons of Dawn would have to destroy what should have been recovered, named, and interred. "Hold fire until target lock," Voss ordered, voice cold. A corpse in Imperial fist's plate lurched toward him. Its chest bore a name half scraped away. Its helm had been split across the brow. One hand reached out, fingers opening and closing in a parody of recognition. Brother Madron hesitated. The dead thing struck him with impossible force, driving a broken combat blade into his throat seal. Blood jetted across the corridor. Voss shot the corpse through the helm. The bolt detonated inside the skull. Bone fragments and warp flame burst from the eye lenses. The body fell in pieces. Madron dropped to one knee, one hand clamped to his neck, drowning inside his own armor. "Desecration is not brotherhood," Voss said. "Fire." The corridor became a slaughter chapel. Storm bolters hammered. Mass reactive rounds tore apart old armor and older bodies. A corpse in ultramarines blue exploded at the waist, its spine whipping loose like a cable. A dead Imperial fist took 4 bolts to the chest before collapsing, its ribcage opening around a glow of witchfire. A black armored corpse with a shattered raven emblem crawled through the fire on broken limbs until Brannock crushed its skull beneath his boot and moved past it without looking down. Every shot felt like sacrilege. Every hesitation killed. Brannock reached the fallen Madron. He scanned. The verdict came quickly. Recoverable. Rounds struck his backplate while he worked. A warp-animated corpse dragged itself toward him, jaw hanging loose beneath a cracked helm. Brannock shot it with his wrist-mounted bolt pistol, then opened Madron's chest with the Narthesium. The dying brother gripped his wrist. "Name me." "You are Madron of the 7th Wall Oath," Brannock said. "Your seed will stand after you." Madron died with the words in his helm. Brannock removed the progenoid. Then he saw the bait. At the far end of the corridor, beneath a rack of hanging chains, 3 stasis reliquaries had opened. Inside them rested progenoid glands, suspended in amber fluid. They bore Imperial markers, sacred seals, old names, lost names from Malodrax's earlier dead. For a heartbeat, the apothecary moved toward them. Then his scanner screamed. The gene seed was alive in the wrong way. Corrupted threads pulsed through it. Scrap code twitched in the seal runes. Minuscule warp parasites curled inside the sacred tissue, waiting for contact, waiting for preservation, waiting to be carried back into the chapter's future. Brannock stopped. He stared at the relics of lineage. His duty was to recover. His duty was to preserve. His duty was continuity. His duty was also purity. "Contaminated," he voxed. Lysander turned from the cell doorway. "Confirm." "Confirmed. Gene seed traces. Imperial origin. Corrupted beyond reclamation. Designed for recovery." The corridor shook as more corpses slammed against the shield line. Brannock raised his flamer. No one spoke as he burned the reliquaries. The amber, fluid boiled. The sacred glands blackened, split, and curled into ash inside their glass coffins. For a moment, the parasites within screamed in tiny voices over the vox, wearing tones stolen from dead brothers. Brannock held the flame on them until the glass sagged and the names on the seals were unreadable. When he lowered the weapon, he had denied the chapter part of itself. He had done it correctly. More doors opened. This time, the sounds from within were not dead armor dragging across stone. They were human sounds, weak, thin, terrified, living captives or things close enough to life to beg, chained in prison galleries beyond the next intersection. Their heat signatures flickered through the walls. Men bound to racks, men sealed in cages, men wired into vox nodes. Some wore Imperial tattoos. Some might have been crew from ships lost years before. Some might have been bait. Some might have been innocent. On Malodrax, that distinction had been made functionally useless. Iron warriors' laughter crackled through the walls. "Come, Masons, save them, count them, name them, spend the breach on meat." The prison galleries ahead filled with movement, warp traces, corpse signals, mine heat, living captives, all layered together. Thane turned toward Lysander. "First Captain." Lysander understood the question before it was asked. The corridor behind them was sealed. The dead were rising from every cage. The prison architecture was guiding them inward, slowing them, forcing identification, forcing hesitation. The captives were positioned to divide discipline from pity, duty from momentum. Every second gave the iron litany more time to awaken beneath the city. "Flamers forward," Lysander said. Voss looked at him for the smallest fraction of time. Then he obeyed. Chaplain Thane's skull helm stared at Lysander. "There are living signatures. There are enemy functions. Some may be Imperial. They are between us and the objective." The chaplain said nothing. His armor recorded the order, not as treachery, not as heresy, as evidence, as weight, as a stone placed upon a scale that only judgment would balance. Heavy flamers came forward. The galleries burned. Promethium rolled through the arched chambers in liquid sheets. Captives screamed. So did the warp-animated dead. So did things hidden among them, wearing captive heat signatures as masks. Fire-stripped flesh from bone, cooked lungs, burst eyes, and reduced prayer to smoke. Mines detonated in the flames. Corpse puppets staggered from the inferno, and were cut down by bolter fire. The Imperial fists advanced through the heat, with shields raised, their armor blackened, their oaths silent. Lysander did not look aside. Thane did. The prison levels began to collapse only after Severian found the support spine. The tech marine had forced his way through a maintenance crawl beside the lower gallery, cutting through cables that bled preservative fluid and old spinal matter. He reached a column array beneath the central cell block, a ring of black iron pillars supporting the prison's ceiling and the city districts above. Each column bore demon nails hammered into the metal and linked to the iron litany below. Structural collapse possible, Severian voxed. Localized, severe, survival likelihood reduced. Do it, Lysander said. Escape route? Make one. Severian's answer was a burst of Binharic assent. Charges were placed. Melter packs fixed. Support runes marked. The Imperial fists withdrew by sections, firing into the burning dark as dead brothers crawled and dragged themselves after them. Brannock carried what gene seed he had recovered. Voss dragged a wounded warrior until the brother ordered him to stop. Voss stopped, not from cruelty, from obedience to truth. The wounded would slow the breach. The wounded knew it. He raised his bolter and fired until the collapse took him. Lysander was the last to leave the cell corridor. He stood once more before the chamber where he had been held. The old chains still hung on the wall. He could have taken them. He could have made them trophies of endurance, relics of victory, proof that Malodrax had failed to keep him twice. His gauntlet rose. For a moment, his fingers hovered near the nearest shackle. Then they closed around nothing. He turned away. The charges detonated. The prison levels died in thunder. Support columns folded inward. Ceilings split. Stasis cages burst. Bone script shattered into white fragments. The cell disappeared behind a falling slab of black iron. Chains snapped and were buried beneath tons of stone and fire. The galleries collapsed one after another, drowning the dead, the captives, the traps, the relics, and the preserved humiliation of Darnath Lysander beneath the weight of Kulgard's own bones. The Imperial fists emerged through dust and flame into a lower chamber, torn open by the collapse. For several breaths, there was only falling debris and the cooling crackle of promethium. Then the floor split, not from the collapse, from something below answering it. A shaft opened beneath the broken prison, vast and vertical, descending beyond Auspec's clarity. Red light pulsed at its bottom, not firelight, not reactor glow, something rhythmic, something alive by cruelty and machine logic. The sound rose from the depths in waves, a low, organized moan so vast it seemed to move through armor, bone, and thought. Lysander stepped to the edge. Far below, continent-scale engines turned in the dark, towers of flesh and iron, choirs of nerve wire, captives in numbers beyond counting, bound into harmonic racks. Shield energy pulsed from their agony into Kulgard's final bastions. The city's last defense did not merely draw power, it sang pain into architecture. Severian's voice came over the vox, thin beneath the magnitude of what his instrument saw. The Iron Litany. Chaplain Thane stood beside Lysander at the lip of the shaft. Below them, the pain engine breathed. Lysander lifted the Fist of Dawn. Then we silence it. The shaft descended into a cathedral of suffering. It had no altar in any holy sense. It had no nave, no choir stalls, no saints in glass, no reliquary bones honored by incense and prayer. It was a machine temple built downward into the marrow of Malodrax, a continent-scale wound beneath Kulgard, where iron platforms hung over darkness and cables thicker than fortress towers pulsed like veins. The air trembled with the Iron Litany, and the sound was not music. It was organized agony. Billions of nerve impulses moved through the machine temple in measured waves, slave populations from the sealed districts above, prisoner remnants dragged from the old cells, mutant choirs grown in vats and nailed into harmonic frames, penal stock wired into pain racks, failed cultists stripped of names and reduced to conductive flesh. Demon-bound logic stacks drank the screams, translated them into shield harmonics, and bled them upward into Kulgard's final void barriers. Pain opened the shield frequencies. Death calibrated the reactor pulses. Suffering became infrastructure. The Iron Warriors had not made this place because they enjoyed the sound of screaming, though some of them surely did. That would have been too small, too wasteful, too human. They had made screams useful. They had refined torment into a power source, cruelty into architecture, despair into mathematics. Every captive wired into the litany had a function. Every torn throat corrected a waveform. Every failing heart contributed to the rhythm of defense. Here, at last, the Iron Warriors had revealed the purest expression of their doctrine. Everything could be made into a wall. The Imperial fists descended by gravline, by broken lift cage, by chain and mag boot, dropping from the collapsed prison levels into the upper gantries of the temple. The air grew hotter with every meter. It tasted of ozone, rust, burned nerves, and old blood. Stormbolters were raised before boots touched metal. Auspex runes flickered and failed, overwhelmed by the density of flesh, machinery, warp taint, and shield discharge. Lysander landed upon a gantry that rang beneath his weight. Around him, Terminators formed a shield knot without command. Their armor was scarred from the streets above, their oath seals burned, their ammunition reduced, their numbers fewer than when the siege had begun. They looked down through the grating and saw the central pain choir. It rose from the abyss like a tower made of bodies and brass. Thousands of captives were mounted in vertical rings around a harmonic throne. Their spines were opened and threaded with copper. Their skulls were locked backward, mouths held open by iron frames, their throats connected to resonator tubes. Above them hung a mass of logic engines, diamond cages, and sensor veins, all shuddering in time with their pain. At the throne's center sat an engine priest, or what remained of one, swollen into a mass of flesh, cable, and bronze organs. His arms had been replaced by tuning rods. His face had been peeled open and stretched across a mask of needles. Every twitch of his body adjusted the suffering below. Central choir sighted, Lysander voxed. Severian answered from a different descent vector, his voice distorted by static and machine hymn. Reactor logic lies eastward. Warpsmith presence probable. Take it. By iron sanctified. Voss's voice followed, harsh with interference. Breacher squads moving west. Shield anchors visible through lower gantries. Heavy resistance. Break them, Lysander said. Confirmed. The assault split into 3 wounds. Lysander and the Terminators advanced toward the central choir, crossing gantries slick with condensation and blood vapor. Severian led Tech Marines and surviving Battle Brothers toward the machine sanctum where demon logic governed the reactors. Voss drove breacher squads downward toward the shield anchors, where the pain gathered into transmission pylons feeding the city above. The Iron Warriors had been waiting. Havocs dominated the upper gantries with perfect fields of fire. Heavy bolters opened from dark balconies. Lascannons stabbed through steam with surgical malice. Missile launchers spoke from recessed platforms hidden behind sheets of hanging chain. Autocannons hammered walkways until they buckled and dropped warriors into the depths. Every fire lane had been measured. Every angle had been tested. Every likely shield position had already been assigned a weapon. Brother Galvor died first in Lysander's line, a Lascannon beam punching through his storm shield and cutting him from shoulder to hip. His armor came apart in glowing halves, the meat inside already cooked. The brother behind him stepped into the space before the corpse finished falling. A missile struck the gantry and blew Brother Othran sideways into a pain rack, where screaming captives clawed weakly at his armor as he crushed them beneath his weight. He rose, fired twice, and then an autocannon burst tore his helm apart. The Imperial fists died exactly where the Iron Warriors expected them to die. They died filling the lanes. A broken shield became cover. A corpse in Terminator plate became a barricade. A fallen brother's body blocked a Lascannon angle long enough for the next warrior to cross. The Sons of Dawn had always known how to build with stone, iron, and their own dead. The Iron Warriors had calculated that. They had also calculated how much it would cost. They had not calculated refusal. Lysander advanced behind Rampart, each impact across the shield, throwing light across his helm. The Fist of Dawn rested ready at his side. He did not run. He did not need to. He crossed the gantry as though it were already taken, and the brothers behind him made his certainty true through blood and pressure. "Upper left," he voxed. Brother Cestus fired a cyclone missile into the balcony. The Havoc Nest vanished in a blast that threw limbs, heavy bolter parts, and black armor fragments out into the abyss. "Proceed." They proceeded. To the east, Severian entered the machine sanctum through a hatch that tried to bite him. The door had teeth. Not metaphorical teeth. Real ones, set into the inner seal, each made from bone and black iron, snapping shut around his servo arm as the hatch opened. Severian applied pressure until the mechanism broke. He stepped through with his plasma cutter in one hand and a data spike extended from his wrist. The sanctum was a jungle of cables, brass organs, reactor vanes, and demon engines chained into logic racks. Cogitator stacks rose in crooked pillars, each one crowned by skulls, whose mouths whispered calculations in voices that had once been human. Scrap code moved across the walls like insects. At the chamber's center, Warp-Smith Kadrak Fol unfolded from the machinery. He had too many limbs, and none of them were clean. Mechatendrils rose from his back in a halo of blades, injectors, drill heads, and furnace tools. His armor breathed at the seams. His helm was a split iron mask with lenses burning the color of infected wounds. In one hand, he held a demon wrench, its jaws chewing the air. In the other, a coil of cable that writhed like a flayed serpent. Little priest of a dead machine. "Cult," Vol said. "You come to correct what your kind cannot understand." Severian raised his plasma cutter. "I understand error." Vol laughed in scrap code, and the duel began. There was no elegance in it, no blade dance, no exchange of honor. Servo arm met mechatendril with the crash of industrial tools. The demon wrench bit into Severian's pauldron and tore away ceramite. Severian's plasma cutter carved through one writhing cable, and it screamed as it fell, spraying black oil and spinal fluid across the floor. Vol spat a burst of scrap code that made Severian's helm display fracture into false runes. Severian answered with Binharic curses, hard enough to burn out a nearby skull cogitator. A mechatendril punched into Severian's abdomen and began drilling. He trapped it against his armor, severed it at the joint, and drove a data spike into Vol's chest plate. The Warpsmith answered by slamming the demon wrench into Severian's helm, cracking the left lens. "Your machine spirits whimper," Vol hissed. "They endure," Severian replied. To the west, Voss reached the shield anchors. The first anchor stood in a chamber shaped like a vertical gun barrel, its walls lined with resonator plates. At the center rose a pylon of black iron and brass, fed by cables running through the bodies of chained captives. They had been arranged in walls around it, ranks upon ranks of men, bound shoulder to shoulder, chest to back, with conduits punched through their ribs. Some still wore scraps of Imperial uniforms. Some had the brands of ship crews taken in earlier void battles. Some were children when first chained, though time and pain had made their ages meaningless. Their bodies formed a living barrier. Behind them, the shield anchor pulsed. Voss's squad halted for half a second. Only half. That was all the Iron Warriors had purchased with those lives. Brother Solm's voice came through the vox. "Firing through them will rupture the anchor feed." "Yes," Voss said. There are loyal marks among them. Yes, the captives saw the yellow armor. Some tried to speak. Their mouths had been stapled around tubes, their tongues pierced by copper wire. The sounds that came out were wet, broken, and useless. Voss raised his stormbolter. Fire! The Imperial fists fired through the captives. Mass reactive rounds tore through bodies and detonated inside the cables behind them. Men burst apart against their restraints. Ribs opened, heads vanished, blood sheeted across the anchor plates, steaming as it touched charged metal. The living wall came apart under disciplined fire. Behind it, the pylon flickered, its harmonics destabilizing. Voss stepped through the ruin of bodies, placed melter charges along the anchor's lower joints, and did not look at the faces beneath his boots. The alternative was losing the war. He triggered the charges. The shield anchor died in white heat. At the central choir, Lysander reached the harmonic bridge. The engine priest at the throne turned his peeled face toward him. The captives around the tower screamed in a higher pitch as the litany adjusted itself. Iron warriors fired from side platforms, trying to cut the bridge beneath the terminators, but the Imperial fists had closed too far. Stormbolters answered. A havoc fell from above, struck the edge of a resonator ring, and burst across the screaming captives below. A hololithic projection ignited before the throne. Warsmith Barak Torval appeared in static and red light, his iron helm huge above the bridge, his image built from the pain engine's glow. Darnath Lysander, Torval said, still advancing, still mistaking motion for virtue. Lysander kept walking. Torval's projection shifted, matching his pace. Look around you, son of dawn. Do not turn away from the proof. We are not opposites. We are the same theorem solved by different hands. No. Yes, we turn lives into walls. So do you. We call endurance sacred. So do you. We spend the weak to preserve the strong. So do you. We teach flesh that suffering has purpose. So do you. We worship victory through suffering. And so do you, though you hide your altar beneath gold and oaths. Lysander reached the final span before the choir throne. A Lascanon beam struck rampart and scattered across the shield field in a blaze of white. You torture, Lysander said. You sacrifice. We endure. You make others endure beside you. Lysander swung the Fist of Dawn into the bridge rail, crushing it aside as he advanced. Torval's voice hardened. You are offended because we do honestly what your Imperium does by decree. We are iron without lies. You are iron painted yellow. For one breath, Lysander had no answer that satisfied even himself. He saw the captives in the shield anchors. He saw the prison galleries burning under his order. He saw mortals dying in the void to hold fleet position. He saw brothers spent as stones in a fire lane. He saw Malodrax taking every virtue and turning it until it resembled its opposite. Then he saw the central engine priest twitching upon the harmonic throne, feeding on screams. Lysander raised the Fist of Dawn. No, he said again, and this time it was not argument. It was sentence. He struck the throne. The thunder hammer fell with a crack of caged storm. The engine priest's torso exploded across the brass cradle, organs, cables, and wet machinery blasting outward in a fan of gore and sparks. The harmonic rod snapped. The choir shrieked as one. Warp light burst from the throne's core, full of clawing faces and half-formed words. Lysander hammered again, shattering the throne's lower spine. The pain tower convulsed. Captives tore free from their restraints, only to fall screaming into the abyss. Resonator rings split, spilling blood, fire, and fragments of bone. Torval's projection flickered. You cannot kill the equation, the warsmith said. Lysander brought the hammer down a final time. The harmonic throne collapsed inward. The projection vanished in static. The central choir died in a storm of screaming warp light, ruptured metal, and blood rain that fell upward for a moment, before gravity remembered itself. Across the machine temple, The iron litany broke. Severian drove Vol back into the reactor logic stack. The warpsmith tried to pull the demon engine's power through himself, but the broken choir destabilized the feed. Severian seized him with his servo arm and held him against the shrieking cogitator pillar. "Error identified," Severian said. He cut the warpsmith open with the plasma cutter from groin to throat. Vol's armor split. What poured out was not only blood, but black oil, wires, teeth, and small demon faces burning in the heat. Severian drove his data spike through the exposed reactor port behind him and began the rite of severance. In the west, Voss destroyed the second anchor, then the third. Each one required the same answer. Each one had a wall of chained captives. Each one died under Imperial fire. His squad was almost gone by the end. Brother Solm fell with a Volkite wound burned through his abdomen. Brother Dravus lost an arm to a chain axe and detonated his own melter charge by hand. Voss kept moving, armor red to the waist, Stormbolter empty, Chainfist still alive. Above Kulgard, the shields failed. The change was visible from orbit. The fortress city's outer barriers flickered once, twice, then collapsed in sheets of dying light. The poisoned clouds above Kulgard split as the Imperial Fist's fleet opened fire. Orbital lances stabbed downward, white and absolute, cutting through cloud, smoke, tower, and stone. Macro shells followed in burning lines. Kulgard's outer districts vanished under the bombardment. Manufactoria became molten lakes. Bastion tops folded into themselves. Cathedral guns were cut from their mounts and fell through the city like dying gods. Trenches filled with liquid fire. Void war, ground war, and underworld war became one act of destruction. The machine temple shook as the city above was carved open. Lysander stood among the remains of the central choir, armor drenched in blood and soot, the fist of dawn still crackling from the throne's death. Around him, the last screams of the iron litany faded into failing machine hum. For the first time since the descent, the pain beneath Kulgard no longer sang. Then a signal appeared. It did not come from the city. It did not come from the walls, the towers, the orbital relays, or the dying shield engines. It rose from below the iron litany, from beneath the machine temple, from a depth older than Kulgard, and hidden beneath the architecture of all their suffering. Severian's damaged voice entered the Vox. Unknown transmission. Personal encryption. Iron Warrior's origin. Source is beneath us. The signal sharpened. A voice came through, amused, familiar, and dry as old chains dragged across stone. Good, son of dawn, you have found the shell. Now come and see what Malodrax was built to hide. The hololith flickered in Lysander's visor. Beneath the dead litany, buried deeper than the prison, deeper than the city, deeper than the known fortress roots, an ancient station core awakened in the dark. Shontu's signal pulsed from its heart. The descent beneath the iron litany was colder than the prison levels, though no natural cold could have lived so deep beneath Malodrax. Heat still rose from the broken machine temple above them. Kulgard still burned overhead, its outer districts carved open by orbital lances, its manufactoria dying in chains of secondary detonations, its slave districts collapsing beneath the weight of their own sacrifice. Yet below the ruined pain engines, beyond the ruptured choir vaults and the dead shield anchors, the air changed. It lost the stink of recent suffering and took on something older. Dust, dry iron, dead vacuum trapped behind sealed doors, stone that had not known atmosphere until traitors broke it open. The Imperial fists descended through a shaft cut not by builders, but by impact. Its walls were not the black hazard-marked iron of the Iron Warriors. They were older alloys, pale beneath the grime, ribbed like the interior of a void ship, and scaled in places by mineral growth. Cables hung dead from the sides of the shaft, not copper or brass, but strange black conduits whose surfaces drank the light from helm lamps. The architecture did not agree with itself. Some sections were fortress buttresses, Others were starship ribs. Others were shrine arches carved with symbols that Imperial autosensors could not translate, and Techmarine Severian's auspex refused to name. Malodrax had not merely been built. It had grown over something. Lysander led the descent by magline, his terminators lowering themselves through drifting ash and falling embers from the world above. Around them came the wounded remnants of the assault force, fewer now, each brother bearing the cost of cool guard upon his armor. Sergeant Voss descended behind him with a breacher remnant, one shoulder guard cracked, chain fist teeth black with dried blood. Apothecary Brannock carried gene seed vials in a sealed reliquary locked to his chest plate. Chaplain Thane moved with Crozius ready, Skullhelm turned constantly toward the dark beneath them. Severian's voice came through the vox, strained by damage to his helm and machine systems. The structure below predates confirmed Iron Warrior's occupation. Material readings are inconsistent with local manufacturum output. Some sections register void hull density, others read as planetary defense architecture. There are weapon conduits larger than Kolgard's primary reactors. Purpose, Lysander said. Buried void weapon control system, dormant until recently. The Iron Warriors built Kolgard above it as armor, key and lock. And Shontu? He did not conquer Malodrax for its walls alone. The shaft opened into a chamber vast enough to contain a cathedral and a battleship grave in the same breath. Tamanash Root waited below. It was half fortress, half starship skeleton, half shrine to wars that should have been impossible. Its central vault extended beyond the range of helm lamps, a cavern of suspended gantries, armor ribs, sealed gun conduits, and dead control thrones. Immense circular doors lined the far walls, each one broad enough to admit a cruiser's prow. Weapon spines ran upward into the planet, linking to systems buried across the continents above. Statues stood along the causeways, but they were not saints. They were figures in armor too old to place, their faces deliberately smashed, their hands resting upon weapons shaped like spears, cannons, and execution devices all at once. The air hummed with power, returning after ages of sleep. Then the Iron Warriors opened fire. They held the first descent causeway in cataphractii plate, ancient Terminator armor slabbed with extra iron, their hazard-striped shields locked together, their combi melters raised beneath cyclone missile racks. They were not the line troops bled away in the streets. These were elite siege veterans, hard-eyed killers in warplate heavy enough to make the gantry groan beneath them. Their chain fists were already awake. Their guns were already aimed. They fired before the Imperial fists reached the floor. The front of the causeway became white fire. Brother Arctan took a combi melter burst to the chest and vanished inside his own armor, the heat boiling him so fast his helm lenses burst outward in twin jets of steam and blood. Missiles screamed down the shaft and detonated among descending fists, snapping maglines, hurling yellow armored bodies against the walls. A Terminator struck the ancient alloy hard enough to crack both it and himself, then slid downward, trailing blood and ceramite fragments. Lysander hit the causeway with rampart raised. A cyclone missile burst against his shield, washing the field in flame. He strode through it. "Advance!" he voxed. The Imperial fists answered with storm bolters and hate. The Iron Warriors did not retreat in panic. They withdrew in perfect increments. Fire, step back, shield lock, fire again. Every section of the causeway had been pre-measured. Every fallback point gave them a new angle. Every retreating step cost the fists blood. Chain fists met storm shields. Combi melter beams burned through railings and armor alike. Cyclone racks emptied into the confined spans, filling the vault with explosions that rolled back and forth between the walls. Voss reached the enemy line and drove his chain fist into a hazard-striped shield. The teeth screamed, biting through iron and the arm behind it. The Iron Warrior leaned into the wound, and fired his combi bolter into Voss's helm at point-blank range. Rounds detonated across the faceplate, cracking one lens. Voss headbutted him, then tore the shield away with the arm still attached. "Breach made," Voss said. "Proceed," Lysander answered. They forced the cataphractii back, but not fast enough. Tamunash root pulsed beneath them. Honsou's signal crawled through the vault in bursts of static and old amusement. Lysander felt the station waking in the deck. He felt the entire planet shift by fractions. "We need force inside the under-fortress," he said. Severian turned his damaged helm toward him. "Teleport interference is severe. Warp shear remains from the Iron Litany's collapse. Material obstruction probability extreme. Can you mark insertion beacons?" "Yes. Do it." The tech marine did not argue. He drove a beacon spike into the causeway and began transmitting through scrap code interference, machine static, and the dying screams of corrupted reactors above. The signal was narrow, precise, and dangerous. Aboard the strike cruiser in high orbit, the teleportariums answered. Lightning tore through Tamunash root. The mass teleport strike came in waves of blue-white fury. Terminator veterans of the Imperial fists materialized inside the buried vault. Disciplined wrath hurled into the enemy heart. Some arrived perfectly, boots striking iron, storm bolters rising before the teleport flare faded. Others paid the price. Brother Jorvan appeared fused into a support wall from the waist down. His armor and the ancient metal had become one screaming shape. He fired both weapons until a cataphractii chain fist split his helm. Brother Castor arrived with his left arm trapped inside a sealed conduit and severed it himself with a combat blade before joining the line. Another teleport flare birthed 3 Imperial fists inside an Iron Warriors formation. They emerged among traitors like thunder-given bodies, thunder hammers swinging, storm bolters roaring, the chamber around them becoming a slaughter pit in seconds. A traitor's head burst beneath a hammer blow, helm and skull flattening into a black-red smear. A combi melter fired wild, vaporizing the upper half of another Iron Warrior and 2 hanging cables behind him. Lightning claws punched through cataphractii plate and dragged out ropes of organs and broken rib. The newly arrived fists formed knots of yellow amid the iron dark, each one exactly where Severian's beacons had dragged them, each one paying for accuracy with flesh, but changing the battle by arriving where needed most. Horrific, triumphant, correct. Honsou spoke at last, not through a memory coil, not through a hidden vox spirit, not through recorded torment. His true voice entered every channel with contempt, sharpened into calm. So the stone remembers how to fall from the sky. Lysander crushed an Iron Warrior's knee with the Fist of Dawn and drove him from the causeway into the abyss below. Show yourself. In time. Architects do not stand beneath the wall they are demolishing. You hide beneath your fortress. I preserve the design. You mistake position for courage because your gene-father made a virtue of standing still. The voice carried no berserker heat, no frothing devotion. Honsou sounded like an engineer explaining structural failure to a rival too proud to see the cracks. Arrogant, bitter, theatrical only because contempt enjoyed an audience. You came to scour Malodrax, Honsou said, but you still do not understand it. Kulgard was armor. The litany was a key. Tamunash root is the weapon. This world is not a fortress, Lysander. It is a gun that learned to wear continents. Across a distant command bridge within the under-fortress, Warsmith Barak Torvhal heard the same transmission. He stood amid collapsing tactical projections, his armor still linked to the dying city above. Red casualty runes covered his displays. Kulgard's outer bastions were gone. The iron litany was silent. The mortar crown was ash. The wall engine dead. The first wall gone. Yet Tamunash Root still woke beneath him, and Shontou's signal was not centered in the command sanctum. It was moving toward the lower launch vaults. Torval understood. Honsou intended to abandon Malodrax if needed, not out of fear, out of preservation. The war mattered more to him than the fortress. He would let the world die if he could carry away its weapon lore, its command keys, its hatred, and the continuation of his own design. Several iron warriors around Torval absorbed the same truth. One nodded, accepting the logic. Survival of command was survival of war. Another spat a curse into his helm grill, seeing betrayal. To an iron warrior, a fortress was not merely a position, it was proof. To leave it before the final stone fell was a calculation some could respect and others could never forgive. Torval stared at the shifting signal. "Honsou," he voxed through a sealed channel. "Coolguard still holds inner sectors. Coolguard has served. It can still bleed them. It is bleeding them. That was always its purpose." "And the garrison?" "Spent." Torval's power fist closed until the joint screamed. "We are not slaves." "No," Honsou replied. "You are ammunition, with opinions." The channel cut. For the first time since the invasion began, Barak Torval's silence was not calculation alone. It was hatred divided against itself. The Imperial fists reached the primary vault by breaking the last cataphractii line against its own blast doors. The doors were ancient, layered in dead sigils, and iron warriors' control locks. At their center lay a circular depression surrounded by old mechanism teeth. Severian scanned it, then turned toward Lysander. "The lock responds to the hammer." Lysander looked down at the Fist of Dawn. Its head glowed faintly in the vault light, not with active power field alone, but with resonance. Whether the Iron Warriors had keyed the mechanism in mockery to the relic taken from him, whether Honsou had used its recovered history to bind station systems, whether the weapon's own age spoke to the root's ancient machine spirit, none could say with certainty. The result was enough. The hammer had been made part of the station's answer. Thane saw it. "They made your relic into a key. They tried, or the root remembers it." Lysander set the hammerhead into the depression. The mechanism teeth closed around it without scratching the sacred metal. Deep inside the door, locks older than Coolguard rotated awake. Before the vault opened, Thane stepped close enough that only Lysander heard him over the vox. "The chapter came to scour Malodrax," the chaplain said, "but you came for a voice in your skull." Lysander did not turn. Beyond the door, Honsou's signal pulsed like a heartbeat. Thane continued, "Every wall has led you inward because you allowed it. Every insult drew you deeper. Every memory became a map. Say the truth before the next breach, Son of Dawn." The vault locks groaned. Lysander's fingers remained around the haft of the Fist of Dawn. "Yes," he said. The word was quiet. It carried no excuse. Then the vault opened, and he advanced anyway. Tamunash Root awakened in full. The buried station engines ignited beneath them with a sound too deep for hearing. The floor lifted. Ancient weapon conduits opened across the vault, drawing power from reserves hidden under continents. Far above, across Malodrax, ash plains split in burning seams. Dead trenches collapsed into glowing fissures. Coolguard's broken towers leaned as the earth beneath them pulled away. Mountains cracked along lines that were not geological, but mechanical. Orbital augers screamed as the planet's crust shifted around something vast beginning to rise. Malodrax was not only under siege, it was opening. The fortress world cracked from beneath, plates of iron and stone separating as buried engines forced part of the planet upward. Tamunash Root was preparing to launch a section of Malodrax into the void, a fortress fragment, a weapon core, a war engine wrapped in continental armor. Honsou's voice returned, soft with victory not yet earned. "Come then, Lysander, break the root before it flowers. The chamber shook as the world tore itself open around them. The final battle began everywhere at once. Above Malodrax, the Imperial Fist's fleet descended into killing range, its strike cruisers bleeding fire from wounded flanks, its escorts burning hard to hold position, while the fortress world tore itself open beneath them. Macro cannon decks roared in chained broadsides. Lance batteries charged until their housings glowed white. Torpedoes dropped through the atmosphere like falling stars, their guidance spirits screaming hymns of collision as they plunged toward Coolguard's surviving bastions. Below, the fortress guns fired upward. Coolguard was dying, but dying did not make it harmless. Its remaining cathedral guns elevated from shattered towers, their barrels cracked, their crews burning, their machine spirits corrupted beyond sanity and still obedient to the last order. Macro shells climbed into the polluted heavens and burst against Imperial void shields in blooms of dirty sunfire. Flak storms filled the lower skies. Missile swarms rose from hidden silos and struck thunderhawks in their bellies, turning assault craft into falling coffins of flame and ceramite. The understation pulled against the planet's crust. Tamanash Root was no longer asleep. It strained beneath the world, like a weapon trying to remember the sky. Continental plates of iron and stone split along ancient seams. Trench lines collapsed into glowing fissures. Manufactoria toppled as their foundations sheared away. Chain lifts snapped and whipped across districts, cutting through towers and slave pens alike. Entire hab blocks slid into openings where the ground had become a mouth. The Iron Warriors had built Malodrax as a fortress over a gun. Now the gun was tearing loose, and the fortress screamed around it. Imperial Fists squads became isolated across kilometers of ruin. Some fought on broken gantries beneath Coolguard. Some held burning streets where the buildings fired from both sides. Some stood in trenches that had become cliffs. Others vanished from the Vox entirely, their last runes blinking once, before being swallowed by static fire or collapsing stone. The chapter did not have enough warriors to be everywhere. It had never had enough. It advanced by choosing where its dead would matter most. Lysander chose the heart. He led the assault through the primary vault and into Honsou's command sanctum, with Sergeant Hector Voss on his right, Chaplain Thane close behind, Apothecary Brannock moving through smoke with the sacred reliquary locked to his chest, and the surviving Terminators forming a narrowing wedge around their captain. Their armor was no longer clean yellow. It was scorched black, blood red, iron grey beneath the scars. Oath seals hung in burned curls. Helm lenses were cracked. Storm shields were notched, cratered, and slick with the residue of enemies crushed too close. The passage into the sanctum narrowed like a throat. Iron warriors waited within it. They wore ancient plate, some cataphractii, some indomitus, some patterns so warped by 10,000 years of hatred that their origins had been eaten by mutation and repair. Some were coldly legionary, hazard stripes clean across their shields, weapons maintained with bitter reverence. Others had allowed the warp into the joints of their armor. Horns of iron pushed from pauldrons, cables pulsed like veins, teeth grew along chain-axe housings. One warrior's right arm had become a power fist of black metal and living bone, each knuckle engraved with the name of a fortress he had helped break. They did not howl. They did not charge like beasts. They locked formation and opened fire. Combi bolters hammered the Imperial Fist's wedge. Chain axes roared as the lines met. Thunder hammers struck storm shields with enough force to crack the deck. Power fists came down like siege pile drivers, crushing armor, snapping bones, breaking warriors in half where they stood. The melee had no grace. It was demolition work performed on living bodies. There was no swordplay worth naming, no art beyond leverage, timing, mass, hatred, and the willingness to step into the killing blow if it placed the enemy within reach. Lysander struck the first Iron Warrior champion in the chest. The Fist of Dawn detonated against the traitor's breastplate, folding armor and rib inward until black blood sprayed from the helm grill. The warrior collapsed backward and was trampled by the next rank. Voss took a chain axe across his left shoulder, the teeth biting through ceramite and into the fiber bundles beneath. He trapped the haft under his arm, drove his broken chain fist into the attacker's abdomen, and tore upward. The traitor split open from groin to sternum, intestines and blackened organs spilling hot across the floor. Voss shoved him aside and kept moving. "Breach forward," he voxed. "Proceed," Lysander answered. The sanctum doors opened under their assault. The chamber beyond was an insult made architectural. It had been shaped like a broken wall of the Imperial palace, not a perfect copy, a mockery, a deliberate wound in stone. Its central span rose in jagged battlements, split down the middle, leaning inward as though forever in the moment of collapse. Every surface had been engraved with siege calculations, casualty projections, artillery angles, armor thickness estimates, breach timing equations, and the names of dead Imperial fists. Some names were carved with precision. Some were scratched in as if by a bored hand. Some were repeated over and over, made into decorative borders around kill diagrams. At the far end of the chamber, a command throne rose from the deck, surrounded by control pylons linked to Tamunash route. Honsou stood before it, not seated, not waiting as a lord receiving petition, but observing a model of the understation's awakening. His armor was iron dark and brutally repaired, its hazard striping worn at the edges, its trophies restrained compared to his subordinates. That restraint made him worse. He did not need the chamber to prove his cruelty. The chamber existed to prove his patience. Beside him stood warsmith Barak Torvhal. Torvhal's armor was heavier than before, his command cables torn free, his power fist crackling with caged force. He had come down from Coolguard's dying command bunker, not as a servant, but as a gate placed before another gate, his red lenses fixed on Lysander with a hatred no longer divided. Honsou turned his helm slightly. "You are late, son of dawn." Lysander advanced. The bodyguard moved. The chamber became a butcher's breach. Iron Warriors veterans struck from both flanks. One, with twin chain axes, crashed into Brother Cestus and hacked through his shield edge, then his arm, then his helm, splitting the Imperial fist down through the collar until the axe teeth clogged with meat. Brother Dalmor answered with a thunderhammer that broke the traitor's spine and threw him into the wall of engraved names. A warped Terminator fired a combi melter point blank into Brother Iorath, vaporizing the front of his torso and leaving his backpack and legs standing for one absurd heartbeat before they fell. Brannock moved through the carnage toward the dead whenever a life rune vanished. His white armor flashed in the smoke. He knelt under fire, cut, harvested, sealed, named. He moved to the next. Bolt rounds struck him. A chain axe glanced from his backpack. He did not cease. He was not saving the living. He was preserving the chapter from extinction one bloody vial at a time. Voss saw the champion before Lysander did. The Iron Warrior came through the smoke with a thunderhammer in one hand and a breacher shield in the other, his armor layered in black iron, his helm crowned with the crushed faceplates of loyalist dead. He moved directly into Lysander's path, not to kill him perhaps, but to delay him long enough for Honsou to withdraw into the control vault beyond the throne. Voss stepped into the champion's charge. The thunderhammer struck him across the chest. His breastplate caved inward. Warning runes flared and died. His secondary heart burst. He went to one knee, spat blood inside his helm, and fired his stormbolter into the champion's shield until the magazine ran dry. "Voss," Lysander voxed. 10 seconds, Voss answered. The champion raised the hammer again. Voss drove forward beneath it. His power fist was already broken, its field unstable, its knuckles cracked from too many impacts. He locked it around the Iron Warrior's waist, and Mag clamped himself to the traitor's armor. The champion hammered down onto his back. Voss's spine broke, his armor buckled. He did not release. his remaining crack charges armed one by one across his belt. The Iron Warrior looked down. Voss said nothing. The charges detonated point blank. Both warriors vanished in a white flash and a wet thunderclap. Ceramite fragments scythed across the chamber. Cooked meat, bone dust, black blood, and yellow armor shards sprayed over the engraved wall. Voss's life rune disappeared. The breach opened. Lysander took it. Brannock saw Voss fall. The apothecary turned from another corpse and moved toward the ruin of the sergeant, because duty did not care that the body was scattered, because gene seed might remain, because even a fragment mattered. He crossed 3 meters under fire. A Lascanon beam from the upper gallery struck him through the side. His white armor flashed red, then black. The beam exited through his chest, carrying blood, organs, shattered rib, and the sacred reliquary's outer casing in a spray of molten fragments. Brannock fell beside the crater that had been Voss. His nothesium unfolded once, reflexively, blades opening over empty air. Then a second shot took his helm. The apothecary died reaching for a duty he could not complete. Voss's gene seed was lost with him. Some losses were total. The victory curdled further. Lysander did not stop. Torvald stepped into his path. The warsmith did not rush. He fought like a fortress gate given hatred and limbs. Slow. Inevitable. Layered encounters. Every movement closed one angle and opened another. His power fist met the fist of dawn in a collision that shook dust from the false palace wall. His shoulder plates absorbed a hammer, glancing blow that would have killed a lesser warrior outright. His bootwork forced Lysander toward a seam in the floor, where hidden clamps snapped upward, trying to lock his legs. Lysander broke them with one step. Torvald struck Rampart with his fist. The storm shield flared and cracked along an old wound. He struck again, then drove a knee into Lysander's side, forcing the first captain half a step back. "You are not here for duty," Torvald growled. Lysander swung. Torvald turned the blow into his pauldron and answered with a fist strike that smashed into Lysander's abdomen. Terminator plate buckled. Blood filled Lysander's mouth. A rib shifted despite the armor's support. Warning runes crawled across his vision. "You are hunger in yellow plate," Torvald said. Lysander advanced into the next blow. Torvald's power fist punched through the outer layer of his armor and into the meat beneath his left side. Pain flashed white. Blood poured hot down his torso. The wound would have stopped a mortal heart. It slowed Lysander by less than a breath. He stepped inside the killing arc. Rampart drove forward, pinning Torvald's weapon arm. The fist of dawn came up from below, not in a grand overhead stroke, but in a brutal, close, ugly impact into the warsmith's torso. Once. The armor caved. Twice. The chest plate split, black blood and oil bursting through the fracture. Torvald tried to speak. Lysander struck again. The hammer drove the warsmith backward into the command rail, folding his torso inward until armor plates overlapped like crushed gate leaves. Something inside him broke with a sound like masonry collapsing under pressure. Torvald sagged, still upright, only because the rail held him. His red lenses flickered. "Same wall," he rasped. Lysander leaned close. "No." The final blow crushed Torvald's helm and upper chest into one ruin. Honsou was already withdrawing. A hidden route opened behind the command throne, sealed plates sliding aside to reveal a narrow launch corridor lit by red. Emergency lumens. He did not run. That was perhaps the worst of it. He walked backward with measured calm, combi bolter raised but unfired, his attention on Lysander as if the death of Torvald had been expected, useful, and already spent. "You still cannot tell the difference," Honsou said. Lysander turned toward him, wounded, bloody, hammer raised. "Stand." "Justice and hunger," Honsou continued. "Duty and appetite. You wear one word and obey the other. You came to cleanse a world. You came to silence a voice. You came to prove the cell did not keep you, and yet here you are, still answering it." Lysander moved toward him. The launch corridor began to seal. Honsou's helm tilted. almost amused. "Break the root if it soothes you. Scour the walls. Burn the city. Call the ash on her. I will remember the equation." The plates closed between them. Lysander struck the sealed corridor with the fist of dawn. The blow dented the armor. It did not open. He struck again. The entire chamber shook. Behind the barrier, launch engines fired somewhere deeper in the understation, carrying Honsou away through a prepared route while the world died around him. Chaplain Thane reached Lysander's side. "Captain." Lysander's breath came hard through his helm grill. Blood pattered from the torn seals at his side. "Station control," he said. The control core rose behind the dead command throne, a column of ancient machinery now fully awake. Rings of black metal rotated around a central crystal matrix. Within it, Tamunash Root's targeting spirit burned with hostile light. Across the chamber, pick displays showed Malodrax cracking open, fortress plates lifting, engines igniting, a planetary fragment preparing to tear free into the void. If it launched, it would not merely preserve Honsou's work. It would become a mobile fortress weapon, a seed of Malodrax cast into the stars. Severian's damaged voice came through the vox. Core must be destroyed at the central convergence. Standard charges insufficient. Melter placement impossible within time remaining. Lysander looked at the Fist of Dawn. The hammer still bore the resonance of the root's locks. Its head crackled with a light that was not entirely its power field. Relic, key, mockery, memory. The Iron Warriors had tied it to this place through theft, study, and spite. Now that same connection led to the core's heart. He stepped onto the control dais. The station fought him. Gravity shifted. Data spikes burst from the floor and scraped across his greaves. Servo claws reached from the throne and clawed at Rampart. Warp light crawled over his armor in the shape of chains. He saw the cell. He saw the gate of nails. He saw Voss vanishing in white fire. He saw Brannock reaching for what could not be saved. He saw Routh holding the demon engine's maw open around his own death. He saw dead brothers built into walls, engines, traps, and proofs. Lysander raised the hammer. This was more than a blow. It was relic and hatred, oath and siegecraft, duty and vengeance, Dawn's stubborn blood and a wounded son's refusal to remain caged. It was every wall taken since orbit, every brother spent, every lie answered, every trap endured, every compromise buried beneath the next step. The Fist of Dawn fell. The core shattered. Tamunash Root screamed through the planet. The central matrix exploded inward first, light folding into darkness, then outward in a storm of crystal fragments, black lightning, and machine blood. The rotating rings tore free from their housings and smashed into the chamber walls. Control pylons burst. Ancient conduits ruptured. The station's launch sequence stuttered, caught, reversed, and began to tear itself apart from the inside. Across Malodrax, the scouring became literal. Imperial command gave the order from orbit. Cyclonic-grade bombardment protocols were authorized against major fortress districts. Lance batteries fired until their housings overheated. Macro shells fell into Kulgard's heart. Torpedoes struck bastions already split by the root's death. Manufactoria collapsed into their own furnace pits. Bastion chains melted under sustained orbital fire, their gun towers sagging like candles in a furnace. Trench continents filled with burning iron, molten slag, and the liquefied remains of armies that had spent centuries waiting for this siege. Iron Warriors' retreat paths vanished under bombardment. Some died fighting to the last, bolters empty, chain axes broken, fists still striking at yellow armor through smoke. Some were crushed beneath the fortresses they had built. Some sealed themselves into bunkers that became tombs when the atmosphere ignited inside. Slave pens burned. Demon engines thrashed loose from their chains and were cut apart by lance fire before they could escape the collapse. Kulgard's towers fell one by one, each impact throwing ash and bodies into the poison sky. In the command sanctum, the Imperial fists withdrew through a chamber, coming apart around them. Lysander walked last, wounded side bleeding, rampart cracked, the fist of dawn still smoking from the Corps' death. Thane supported him only once, for one step. Lysander did not refuse. He did not thank him. The chaplain said nothing. Behind them, Tamunash Root died by degrees, dragging sections of Malodrax down into itself as its launch engines failed. The fortress world had tried to become a weapon in flight. Instead, it became a corpse collapsing around its own heart. The Vox filled with static, distress runes, bombardment confirmations, casualty reports, and the names of brothers who no longer answered. Then one final Iron Warrior's transmission slipped through the storm, narrow and fading, fleeing upward through some hidden route into the void. Shontu's voice came with it. No triumph warmed it. No grief softened it. It was laughter without mirth, dry as dust over old chains. "Stone breaks," he said. "Iron remembers." The signal vanished into the dark. Malodrax burned beneath them, broken but not silent. Silence came after the guns, and it was worse. War had given Malodrax a voice. For days it had screamed through macro-cannon throats, flak towers, collapsing bastions, demon engines, vox horns, burning manufactoria, and the endless percussion of shells walking across poisoned ground. It had groaned as Tamunash Root tore at the planet's bones. It had howled when the Iron Litany died. It had thundered when the Imperial fists burned its towers from orbit and drove its walls into molten ruin. Now it lay quiet, not peaceful, never peaceful. Dead things could still accuse. Malodrax turned beneath a sky of ash and orbital fire, no longer a fortress world in any true sense, but a corpse world of cooling metal, cracked bastions, split continents, and furnace wounds that glowed through the smoke. From orbit, the burial fires were visible as red constellations across the ruined surface. Kulgard had become a black scar around a pit of molten foundations. Its cathedral guns lay broken like the bones of giants. Its gate districts had sagged into slag. Its chain lifts hung severed over streets filled with ash, corpses, and the baked shells of tanks. The trenches were worse. Many had filled with burning iron when the bombardment fell. Others had collapsed into the old understation's failed launch seams, swallowing artillery crews, slave pens, Iron Warriors' bunkers, and Imperial dead alike. Wind moved through them in low moans, carrying dust made from rockcrete, ceramite, bone, and the last flakes of bodies too thoroughly burned to name. The Imperial fists walked through it in victory formation. They did not cheer. There was no place for it. No throat among them would have shaped such a sound. Their boots struck the ruined avenue in ordered rhythm, yellow armor blackened by smoke, white heraldry dulled by soot, storm shields scarred, bolters lowered, but ready. They passed through what remained of the Gate of Nails, now only two leaning pillars and a curtain of cooling slag. They crossed the killing streets of Kulgard, where Iron Warriors' fire lanes had been silenced by lance strike and flame. They stepped over twisted hazard-striped plate, broken chain axes, ruptured servo skulls, shattered helms, cooked bone, and the half-melted remains of men welded into machines. They had won exactly what they had come to win. They had paid exactly what their pride demanded. Lysander walked at their head. His Terminator armor had been repaired only enough to keep him alive and moving. The rent in his side was sealed with emergency clamps and hardening synth flesh beneath the plate. His left greave dragged by the smallest fraction, where power fibers had been damaged beyond field repair. Rampart hung from his arm, its face cracked across one quadrant. The fist of dawn rested in his right hand, its head dark, scored and silent after shattering Tamunash Root's core. Chaplain Malrek Thane walked beside him, skull helm sealed, Crozius carried upright like a judgment staff. He had not spoken since the withdrawal from the understation. That silence had weight. At the edge of the broken city, Beneath a collapsed artillery shrine, the casualty rolls were read. No music accompanied them, no triumphal horns, no chant to soften the names before they entered stone. A servo skull hovered above the assembled survivors, its cracked lenses recording the rite. Chapter serfs stood behind the line with censers and reliquaries. Tech marines waited in silence, their red armor blackened, their mechadendrites still twitching with the aftershocks of corrupted data. Apothecaries who were not Brannock stood with sealed gene vaults attached to their chests. Brannock's name came early. Apothecary Brannock, fallen in the command sanctum of Tamunesh Root, gene seed unrecovered, duty incomplete by circumstance, not failure. The words struck harder than a shell. Not every sacred task could be completed. Not every brother could be carried home in a vial, in a sarcophagus, in a name carved cleanly upon adamantium. Some were ash. Some were buried beneath molten kilometers of fortress. Some had been consumed by demon engines. Some had been taken into enemy machines and made too foul to reclaim. Some, like Voss, were lost in the instant of their final act, blasted so completely that even the future within them was denied the chapter. Sergeant Hector Voss, fallen in breach action, gene seed unrecovered, 10 seconds purchased, command advance preserved. Lysander did not move, a fortress stone removed from the wall. That was what each name was, not metaphor alone, reality. The chapter was a wall built from gene seed, oath, memory, discipline, and the long labor of dead warriors. Each battle brother lost was a stone broken from it. Each unrecovered progenoid was a future bastion never raised. Planetary destruction had made the war vast beyond mortal comprehension, but here, in the reading of names, the scale narrowed until it became intimate enough to cut. Brother Arvane Routh was named. Dreadnought Brother Arvane Routh, fallen in the Manufactorum breach, sarcophagus destroyed, remains unrecoverable, last confirmed transmission recorded. The servo skull played it once. I remain. No one answered aloud. They all heard the lie and the truth inside it. He did not remain in form. He remained in oath. The recovered dead were sorted according to rite. Those with bodies intact enough for interment were borne away beneath yellow and black shrouds. Those too damaged for sarcophagus honor were burned with their weapons across their chests. The gene seed recovered from the fallen was placed into stasis under armed guard, each vial named, sealed, blessed, and recorded. Armor fragments were gathered. Heraldry was cut from the dead when whole armor could not be taken. A severed gauntlet, a cracked helm, a strip of pauldron marked by an old oath. These things mattered because the galaxy devoured men too completely, and the Sons of Dawn had learned long ago to save what could still be built into memory. Chaplain Thane climbed a mound of broken stone that had once been part of Kulgard's inner wall. The survivors faced him. His sermon was not comfort. "Dawn's sons endure," he said. The words carried over the ruined avenue, amplified by helmvox, roughened by static and dust. But endurance is not innocence. Do not mistake survival for purity. Do not mistake victory for absolution. We held, we advanced, we killed, we paid. That is all this galaxy permits. The ash fell around them like dead snow. We do not ask the dead to forgive us. We do not ask the enemy to understand us. We do not ask the Emperor for gentleness. We are not gentle. We are the wall where gentleness dies, so mankind may endure another night. He turned his skull helm toward the burned horizon. Remember those who fell. Remember what was spent. Remember also why a wall must be watched from within, lest cracks become gates. Lysander knew the last words were for him. He accepted them without looking away. Later, he went alone to the place where the prison levels had been opened to the sky. The collapse had torn away half the lower structure. Orbital bombardment and the death of the root had done the rest. What remained of his old cell lay exposed amid broken slabs of black iron and bone-scribed stone. The ceiling was gone. The walls were split. Ash drifted down into the chamber where no sky had ever been meant to enter. The rack that had displayed his chains was buried beneath fallen metal, though one length of shackle still protruded from the rubble, like the finger of a drowned man. Lysander stood before it. He did not kneel. He did not weep. The blood in the floor grooves had been burned away. The hooks were bent. The door that had once sealed him within had been crushed under stone. The cell looked smaller now, beneath the open sky. Not harmless, never that, but diminished. A weapon disarmed after cutting too deep. Thane approached, but did not enter. Lysander spoke without turning. "Destroy it." The chaplain watched him. "All of it," Lysander said. "No relics, no trophies, no preserved iron, no chain links carried home, no stone cut for remembrance. Break it, burn it, and bury the slag beneath bombardment glass." "A shrine will not be made," Thane said. "No enemy will use it again. And no son of dawn?" Lysander was silent for a long moment. "No son of dawn," he said. The order was carried out before the hour ended. Melter charges reduced the remaining walls to running slag. Flamers burned the rubble. Thunderhammers broke what survived. The exposed cell collapsed into a pit of red heat and black smoke. Whatever had happened there was not erased. Nothing worth pain could be erased, but it was denied shape, denied architecture, denied future use. That perhaps was the smallest mercy Lysander allowed himself. The judgment came aboard the strike cruiser after the last bombardment fell. Chapter Command did not assemble as a court. There were no theatrics. The Imperial fists did not need them. Lysander stood in the strategium where the invasion had begun, armor repaired enough to bear ceremony, wounds sealed beneath plate, rampart at his side, and the fist of dawn resting upright before him. The casualty rolls lay in data and stone. The refusal of Allied aid was recorded. The losses were recorded. The success of the scouring was recorded. Malodrax was broken. The Iron Warriors had been driven from their fortress world. Kulgard was ash. Tamunash Root was dead. The mortar crown was shattered. The Iron Litany silenced. The enemy's planetary war machine erased section by section, bastion by bastion, gun by gun. Victory was not in dispute. That made the judgment heavier. An Imperial fist could be victorious and still be wrong. A wall could stand and still need rebuilding. A stone could bear weight and still be cracked in a way that endangered the structure. Discipline was not punishment dressed in cold words. It was the method by which the chapter survived its heroes. Thane stood among the witnesses. He did not accuse. His record had already spoken. Lysander listened as command stripped from him what command had judged compromised. Not honor, not name, not duty. Those remained. But position was not a possession. It was a load-bearing place in the wall, and no son of dawn, however famed, however necessary, however bloodied by victory, owned the stone upon which he stood. He had won as a warrior answering captivity. He should have commanded as a son of dawn. That was the difference. That was the wound. Lysander bowed his head once. "I accept the judgment." No more was required. Far from Malodrax, beyond the ruin of its orbital rings and the ash wake of its dying fortresses, Iron Warriors survivors gathered in the dark. Their ships were few, scarred and silent. Some were little more than engine cores wrapped in armor and spite. Others carried data vaults, wounded warsmiths, ammunition ledgers, demon-caged cogitators, and the bitter remnants of garrisons that had escaped through routes prepared before the first Imperial shell had fallen. They had lost the world. They had lost Kulgard. They had lost slaves, guns, engines, bastions, proofs, and graves. They had not lost hatred. In a cold chamber aboard a fleeing vessel, Honsou stood before a fractured projection of Malodrax burning. The image flickered with static and damage. Around him, surviving Iron Warriors watched without mourning. Some hated him for leaving. Some respected him for preserving the war. Most did both, which was the oldest Iron Warrior's compromise. A lesser warlord would have called the defeat temporary. Honsou did not insult them with comfort. "Malodrax is gone," he said. The words entered the chamber like a shell into a sealed bunker. Then he turned from the projection. "Record every firing pattern, every breach response, every casualty delay, every teleport solution. Every moment Lysander chose hunger and named it duty. The fortress has fallen. The equation remains." One Iron Warrior, his armor still marked with ash from Coolguard, spoke from the rear. "And what is defeat, then?" Honsou's helm lenses burned in the dark. "A fortress not yet rebuilt." No one laughed. There was no mirth left in them. Only data, grudges, and future war. The Imperial Fist's fleet departed Malodrax under a sky still burning from its own death. Strike cruisers rose from low orbit and took formation among escorts with patched hulls and blackened prows. Salvage craft moved like carrion around the wreckage of the mine belt. Burial fires dimmed across the planet below, though great wounds in the crust still glowed with the root's failed awakening. The world turned slowly, no longer a weapon aimed outward, but a corpse cooling in the Emperor's uncaring dark. In the strategium, Lysander stood alone. The hololith of Malodrax rotated before him, now marked with kill confirmations, bombardment scars, dead zones, and final quarantine seals. Rampart rested upright beside him. The Fist of Dawn stood with its head against the deck, his gauntlet wrapped around the haft. The chamber where he had once refused aid, given orders, and watched the first fire bloom across the mine belt, now held only the hum of systems and the distant murmur of a ship returning from war, with fewer suns than it had carried in. He had scoured the world that caged him. He had broken the walls, burned the city, silenced the pain engine, shattered the hidden root, denied the cell its shrine, taken from the Iron Warriors a fortress they had made into a theology of cruelty. Yet, in the reflection of the hololithic light, his armor still looked like a prison, not because it confined him, because some prisons were carried inside the plate. Lysander watched Malodrax diminish behind the fleet, a dying ember swallowed by distance and void. He did not speak to it. He did not curse it. He did not claim peace from its ruin. The Fist of Dawn rested against the deck like a sealed verdict. Behind him the stars waited without mercy.